We're gonna do all of them at once.
Councilmember Che, are you ready?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. All right, well then let's get started. I'm calling to order this hearing or roundtable. It's actually a public hearing. Nope, it's a roundtable. This is a roundtable has slightly shorter notice than a hearing. I will refer to this as a hearing. This is a hearing being conducted by the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I am Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Committee of the Whole and of the Council. Today is Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. The time is 11:14 in the morning, and this hearing is being conducted virtually. It is available live via the Zoom video conference broadcast platform. It's also available live on the chairman's website, which is www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. And it's also should be available live via the council's website. In any event, it's being recorded and will be available on the council's website, which is www.tccouncil.us. The subject of this hearing is PR24-789, entitled the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan Approval Resolution of 2022. This legislation was introduced at the request of the mayor on May 31st of this year, so only a month ago. The stated purpose of the resolution is to approve the proposed Chevy Chase Small Area Plan. The small area plan was initiated by the Office of Planning in March 2021. A draft was made public on March 14th, 2022. And a mayoral hearing, that is a hearing by the executive, was held on April 26th, 2022. The purpose of the small area plan is to set a community-informed vision for equitable and sustainable growth along the Connecticut Avenue corridor in the Chevy Chase area. In fact, looking at the resolution, the small area planned area is located in Ward 3. The planning area is bounded by 41st Street Northwest, Military Road Northwest, Nevada Avenue Northwest, and Western Avenue Northwest. The vision is to facilitate housing production, especially affordable housing, and to improve connectivity and vibrancy through context-sensitive redevelopment. The small area plan is based on the following core themes: inviting social and cultural character, equitable housing strategy, inclusive built environment, thriving retail corridor, reimagined civic core, and safe and sustainable mobility. Once approved, the small area plan will provide supplemental guidance to the Zoning Commission and other district agencies in carrying out the policies of the comprehensive plan. According to the law, the council has 45 days to review the small area plan, which will be deemed approved on Monday, October 17th, 2022, if the council does not act. The council may approve or disapprove the small area action plan in whole or in part within this 45-day review period. And as I noted, if the council takes no action, the plan will be deemed approved. I believe it's our intent, given the importance of the small area plan, absent overwhelming testimony to the contrary, that I will present the small area plan or the resolution for approval at the council's July 12th legislative meeting. Accordingly, the record will close at 5 p.m. on July 11th. Again, the record will close at 5 p.m. on July 11th. We have 25 witnesses who've signed up. Before we hear from the Office of Planning, and I'm going to call them half at a time. But first, let me see if Councilmember Che has any opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for calling the roundtable on the small area plan today. And thank you to the Office of Planning and the Community Advisory Committee for this small area plan, and the many, many community members who participated in a long process of producing the document that we have in front of us today. Planning in the midst of a pandemic is not easy, so I'm especially pleased that this was possible. I'm further pleased to acknowledge how much effort, collaboration, and community participation went into the plan. ANC 34G was especially helpful during the long process, and I was happy to see the Office of Planning work so closely with its members, including adopting some of the ANC's specific recommendations ultimately in the final plan. In furtherance of that effort to collaborate, I urge you, Mr. Chairman, to amend the approval resolution to reflect the need for active ANC participation in the implementation of the new plan that's called for here, and in the design of the new civic core. I was pleased to allocate funding for the reconstruction and modernization of both the Chevy Chase Community Center and Library, which will prove to be the cornerstone of the small area plan, in particular by providing an opportunity to address, to some extent, the issue of affordable housing in Ward 3. It's crucial that the planning process continues ahead as quickly as possible so we can determine whether any further funding is needed for the combined projects. Currently slated for funds across fiscal 23 and 24, if there's additional money necessary, it needs to be allocated in the next budget cycle. Now, it's my hope and expectation that you, Chairman Mendelson, will add this resolution to the additional legislative meeting on July 12th so that the various agencies that need to get involved in this planning for the Civic Core can get underway. On the merits of the plan, there's much to praise. The plan encourages more gentle density in Chevy Chase, allows a wider range of income, age, and racial diversity while maintaining the historic character of the neighborhood and addressing the community's needs. It will further allow for revitalization of the area's commercial corridor and an improved mobility infrastructure. So thanks again to you, Mr. Chairman, and to all of the many people who made this possible. And I look forward to hearing the testimony of our witnesses today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So let me call the first 12 witnesses. Cheryl Court, who's representing the Coalition for Smarter Growth. Cheryl Wasserman. Randy Speck, who is chair of ANC 34G. Peter Goslin, who's a commissioner on ANC 34G. Mary Rouse, who's representing the Chevy Chase DC Conservancy. Jamie Butler, who's with WIN Ward 3. Ronald Kahn, Donald Crane, Robin Diener, who's representing the Library Renaissance Project. Brian Keefe, Ellen McCarthy, who's on the steering committee of Ward 3 Vision, and Lee Schenecker. You'll be on 4-minute clock. If you are in gallery view, you should be able to see the clock on your screen. And I usually give 3 minutes, so I'll probably cut folks off pretty close to 4 if they go over. So please be mindful of the time. Ms. Court, you are first, and good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing, and good morning, Councilmember Che. We're pleased to be able to provide this testimony in support of the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan. I'm with the Coalition for Smarter Growth. We're the leading nonprofit in the DC region, advocating for walkable, bikeable, inclusive, transit-oriented communities as the most sustainable and equitable way for the DC region to grow and provide opportunities for all. We're pleased to express our support for this plan and urge the council, the committee, and the council to adopt it shortly. The Small Area Plan fulfills the promise to follow up changes to the comprehensive plan and the future land use map with a more specific neighborhood level planning exercise for Chevy Chase. The Chevy Chase Small Area Plan is a helpful guide for creating a more inclusive, diverse, sustainable, and vibrant community. Building off this exercise, we ask the council and administration to immediately start the process to redevelop the civic core and bring the first dedicated affordable homes to this sought after location. First, we want to just note that we were able to participate in this public process from the beginning, and we appreciate the efforts by DC Office of Planning to use a variety of approaches to reaching the public during a pandemic. Office of Planning was able to reach out and bring in a diverse cross-section of stakeholders. The Coalition for Smarter Growth also complemented the efforts by Office of Planning by providing additional outreach and education and organizing complementary online education efforts and supported the efforts of Ward 3 Vision, which provided a 30-year vision plan for Chevy Chase, and also collaborated with Historic Chevy Chase's public event on this Ward 3 Vision plan, which was held on October 6, 2021. In addition, we all benefited from special outreach and engagement conducted by the ANC in support of the planning effort. We appreciate the additional time that OP provided for the review and comment on this draft plan as well, and also for the response that OP made to a number of important requests for revisions to this plan. At this juncture, we ask the council to adopt the plan and support implementation, which includes creating a form-based zone for the Connecticut Avenue street corridor. The small area plan provides an equitable housing strategy, which incorporates district-wide goals. The plan begins by acknowledging the history of discriminatory land use practices and creating a racially segregated Rock Creek West of today. It uses a racial equity lens to frame the plan's development. The plan maps out how we can achieve equitable outcomes through, most importantly, providing new low and moderate income housing opportunities in the community. While the plan is modest in terms of the number of potential homes and the number of affordable homes, it is an important step forward to fulfilling the district's commitment to racial equity through its land use policies. I've submitted longer testimony, which is posted and you can read, and we just wanted to conclude by saying that we urge the council to adopt the small area plan in order to guide us to preserve what's best about a neighborhood Main Street, fostering a more sustainable way to grow as a city and making room for a diversity of new homes. Critically, the small area plan advances citywide goals of the equitable distribution of affordable housing and racial equity. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Court. Cheryl Wasserman. You are on mute if you're speaking.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Mary Chey and Randy Speck, our chairman of our ANC. My name is Cheryl Wasserman. I've lived one block from Connecticut Avenue to the east for over 3 decades and have taken every opportunity to engage in planning for the future of my neighborhood. First, I am under no illusions here that the council is poised to adopt the SAP. If that is the case, I urge the council to condition the SAP approval on the development of legally binding design guidelines recommended by the SAP and our ANC. As it stands, the SAP merely provides a view of what Chevy Chase DC might look like if certain design parameters were observed. They are not binding. Second, the SAP adopts without change the mixed use and increased density along all of Connecticut Avenue to 5 stories as a right and more as a PUD if it offers some percentage of affordable housing. This one-size-fits-all approach is not appropriate for the few blocks that constitute Chevy Chase, DC, the small town in the big city, abutting suburban Maryland and a circle that has had traffic and accident issues for as long as I can remember. I do not believe heights greater than 4 stories are an appropriate scale for the neighborhood, nor do I believe that the incentives for affordable housing, which I agree we need, will accomplish that goal. New construction is far more costly than preserving existing housing. And given the cost, new units are less spacious, thus failing to meet the particular needs of our bimodal population demographic of both seniors on the one side and young families on the other. In regard to seniors, the SAP in process does seem to have created community support for the use of the public land for the community center and library to include affordable housing, presumably for seniors. Adding affordable senior living at the community center might work to also free up single-family dwellings for young families, but only if we can avoid mansionizing when senior residents move out. This calls for a more holistic approach to achieving the city's goals. So as my second recommendation, I urge the council to support creation of a historic district for Chevy Chase, DC, to preserve not only the unique aspects of this community and its value to the city, but also to create opportunities to maintain existing housing stock for young families that is affordable. Third, and perhaps foremost, the SAP is not at all a plan. There is no consideration of infrastructure, including transportation, parking, water and sewers, schools, etc. For example, the SAP includes illustrations appearing to maximize infilling of existing parking lots, serving the commercial strip without regard to who frequents the commercial strip and restaurants and how they access it, what a future with electric cars requires in terms of EV charging stations and related parking, which can be a draw for local businesses while the customers are charging. The impact of proposed bike lanes and where and how drivers might transition to bikes. I call for a closer examination by the council of what greater use of electric vehicles in the future means for city infrastructure and private property, both to prevent potential hazards as our sidewalks begin to be traversed by charging wires, and we consider incentives or plans for EV charging stations and their commercial draw. Further, the SAP does not explore, in the interest of climate change, requirements for green roofs, solar, and the like. In closing, our engagement has exposed some fundamental questions about assumptions undergirding the mayor's plans, which seem more one-size-fits-all than what might work in different areas of the city. It has a singular focus on housing, which is a real need, when there are other issues to consider like climate change and infrastructure. So I want to thank Councilwoman Che for her years of service, and ANC Chair Randy Speck, both of whom we will sorely miss. And I just feel that despite the efforts, the wonderful efforts of our Office of Planning, the very nice, what I call the SAP is a
Ms. Wasserman,
tiny object, sorry.
I was so intent following your testimony, I didn't notice the clock, but you're a minute over. So thank you for your testimony.
I thought I had 4 minutes and not 3, sorry.
Yes, it was set at 4.
Okay. That I added the thank yous.
Randy Speck. Commissioner Speck, you are on mute.
Chairman Middleton and Councilmember Che, I am Randy Speck, Chair of ANC 34G, and I'm testifying on behalf of our commission, which unanimously authorized the testimony as properly noted as June 27th meeting. The written testimony provided to the committee includes additional information that cannot be covered by the limited time for oral testimony. After nearly 2.5 years of intensive efforts by the commission, the Office of Planning, and the Chevy Chase community, we ask the council to pass a resolution that will provide the framework and tools that guarantee community participation through the ANC earlier in the formal Chevy Chase Small Area Plan implementation process than OP currently proposes. Such an early engagement is essential because the implementation of the CCSAP will shape our neighborhood's future for decades to come. Our commission's resolution and testimony in 2020 initiated the process that has culminated in the SAP now before the council. After the council provided funding for the planning process, the commission was actively involved with OP's year-and-a-half-long development of the CCSAP. The commission has demonstrated its commitment to this effort and to CCSAP's success. In principle, the commission supports the SAP's broad directives and vision. Much work remains, however, if we are to reach the goals that we set out to increase diversity, promote and accommodate growth while balancing the livability of Chevy-Chase DC that is characterized by a scale, function, character, proceeding to prepare the details without ANC and community participation at the very outset of the development and implementation process unnecessarily increases the risk of a less than completely successful outcome and increases the risk of community opposition. We appreciate that OP made significant, important modifications to the draft SAP to address some of the commission's recommendations for changes. The commission's experience demonstrates, however, the need for and the value of robust community input at the earliest stages of the plan implementation. For this reason, our May 9th resolution in support of the SAP was predicated on OP's assurances that the ANC and the community be integrally involved in the creation of a new zone that will guide any new development. The commission recognizes that its role is defined by statute and district agencies must give its issues and concerns great weight. ANC community input will be even more valuable, however, if it is considered during the developmental stage. In other words, an earlier time than providing comments to OP after OP proposes a new zone for the Upper Connecticut Avenue. We are proposing two additions to the resolution that will make it very clear that the ANC will be involved at the earliest possible stages. To make this clear, we ask the council to add this paragraph immediately before section 3.7. ANC 3.4G and the community and the Chevy-Chase community have provided significant assistance in developing the small area plan and their direct participation with the Office of Planning from the outset of whatever process is used in developing and preparing any implementation measures for the small area plan will be essential to the success of the undertaking. We ask specifically that recommendation 2.1 on page 29 of the small area plan include the ANC as an implementer to create the new zone along Connecticut Avenue. Similarly, we were the driving force behind the civic core, the redevelopment of the new community center, library, and housing. Therefore, we ask that we be included as an implementer specifically for that effort and that we be involved in that process from the very beginning. We thank you very much for all your support during this process and particularly for Councilmember Che's support. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Speck. Peter Goslin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Councilmember Che. My name is Peter Goslin. I'm testifying in my own capacity as a commissioner with ANC 3.4G and a 24-year resident of Chevy-Chase, DC. You've just heard our chairman, Randy Speck, speak on behalf of the commission majority. I have only two fairly straightforward points to make today. The first is that I hope you'll listen to Chair Speck's call for you to include language in the SAP as you incorporate it into the comprehensive plan that gives our ANC and our community a substantial role in the drafting of the new zone for our Main Street, the Upper Connecticut Avenue commercial corridor. There is plenty of precedent for commissions and communities to participate at the drafting stage of zoning changes. Consider, for example, the history of the H Street overlay. And on the flip side, Chevy-Chase has just gone through the experience of being presented with a complex document, in this case, the Office of Planning's draft SAP, and told we had 30, later extended to 60 days to comment. In my view, we were unable to build a community consensus around a full response in that limited time. We'd have the same problem if the only role you accord us in the process going forward is as one among many commenters on an OP drafted zoning designation. I offer my second point not to reopen old wounds, but in hope it prompts you to add the participation language we seek, and to keep close watch on OP as it conducts other small area plans in other neighborhoods in the coming months. In my view, the document you have before you does not live up to its claim of growing out of the views of community residents. That's especially so on the critical issue of the balance between change and continuity. As you've already heard, OP planners simply would not take up many issues that commissioners and community residents repeatedly raised, for example, about ensuring our infrastructure, especially our overcrowded schools, roads, and parking, grow in tandem with our population. The planners effectively refused to address the fear of many residents that allowing some change in the community's built environment will result in unfettered change. So, for example, while the plan offers in exquisite detail on page 58 how every single foot of our generously wide Connecticut Avenue sidewalk should be used, when it comes to the issue of building height, an important proxy for development intensity, the only numbers you'll find in this document are in the legend for 2 pictures near the back of the document. And even there, the numbers are treated as illustrative only. I'd be happy to answer questions about why I think this happened, but the result is the planning process and this document have left our community more divided, not less. If we cannot find ways to reduce these divisions by, for example, giving us a substantial role in drafting the new zoning area, this bodes poorly for being able to make the kinds of changes here that will help our community, our city, and our diverse population. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mary Rouse.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to agree with Commissioner Gosselin on his final points. My name is Mary Rouse. I'm a 42-year resident of Chevy Chase, DC, and a former 2-term ANC 3G commissioner. I am founder of the Chevy Chase DC Conservancy, a newly formed group that will be sponsoring the Historic District nomination before the Historic Preservation Office and Historic Preservation Review Board. I live within Square 1868, which includes a section of Connecticut Avenue on the east side that is targeted for redevelopment in the Chevy Chase DC Commercial District. Proposed changes to the avenue as outlined in the SAP will affect me and my neighbors in a way that won't affect anyone else testifying here today, with the exception of 4 others who similarly live in the first blocks off Connecticut Avenue: Ronald Kahn, Donald Crane, Robert Stern, and Mara Verheiden-Hilliard. As I speak, there are thousands of Chevy Chase DC residents who have no idea there's even a Chevy Chase small area plan, let alone what's in it, and that the DC Council is poised to approve it 1 week from today. Whatever happened to waiting 2 weeks between council votes? These residents don't even know the SAP has been railroaded through by the Office of Planning, the ANC, and now the mayor and city council. They didn't ask for the commercial corridor to be turned upside down with 50 to 80-foot buildings, replacing 2-story ones. Those of us who have been paying attention and doing our best to keep our community aware have been ignored and disrespected by the Office of Planning. I can say with a great deal of assurance that this Chevy Chase small area plan does not reflect the wishes of a majority of the Chevy Chase DC community. As someone with no financial interest in the development of Chevy Chase DC, I urge the DC Council to reject this plan and return it to the Office of Planning so the hard work of reaching out to the community and being more responsive to what the majority of members want is reflected in the plan. Right now, it is filled with what the development community wants. On page 11, where community participation is outlined, it's clear that the number of contacts were pathetically small, in the 200 range. In a community of 14,000 people, we've got 7 ANC commissioners here. And when you're talking about making substantial changes to a 100-year-old community, it's unacceptable for 200 or so responses to be an adequate number to make such substantial changes. There's something inherently wrong when 2 developers owning 2 parcels in our commercial district can have their attorneys increase the density of Chevy Chase DC in 8 blocks. There's something inherently wrong when an ANC railroads through a resolution on the SAP that no one in the community had a chance to read before it was voted on. When the ANC doesn't hear comments from neighbors until after long discussions, and when members are given only 1 minute to speak. The Chevy Chase ANC has worked hard, but it has not been a good partner with the community on the SAP. It has cut the community out of discussions and meetings, and it's been out of step with the community on the goals of the SAP. For example, the rebuilding of the community center and so-called civic core, there was never any public discussion about whether this should happen. The last I heard, there was money allocated for the refurbishing of the community center. The library had just had $1 million spent on it. Now we're hearing that both of those buildings must come down. Inclusionary zoning does not provide a sufficient number of affordable units in the new construction to warrant the loss of our civic core, the library and community center, in order to see a paltry number of affordable units. No one did a survey of the community and asked us if we wanted to demolish these buildings. If the rebuilt Wardman in Woodley Park is offering 900 units and can only manage to provide 72 affordable units, it's clear that the Chevy Chase site is not going to be able to provide anything worth the loss of our civic core for 2 or 3 years or more. The Tenley Library took 8 years to build. I am opposed to the new zone and the idea that we will have text and map amendments for this commercial corridor. There's been no discussion about that in the SAP process. And the last paragraph in the draft plan on the last page mentioned this zone, but it was very vague. The new plan mentions it a lot more, but really nobody in this community ever said they wanted a text and map amendment or a new zone, except people who represent the development community. So in my final point, I'd like to say that the Zoning Commission rarely rules in favor of communities. And if Chevy Chase DC does not get a historic district, we will all need to get used to losing at the Zoning Commission. It's disingenuous for the Office of Planning to say that the ANC and community groups will have an important role to play in Zoning Commission cases. Not true. Rarely does the Zoning Commission listen to community groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. I don't have a copy of your statement.
I will provide it to you.
Thank you. Jamie Butler.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Che, and thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan Approval Resolution of 2022. I urge you to vote for it. My name is Jamie Butler. I've been a resident of Chevy Chase for almost 38 years and a district resident for 52 years. It's only recently that I understood the shameful history of displacement and the long-standing practices of discriminatory land use, housing covenants, and lending practices that made this area an exclusive, affluent white neighborhood. The Small Area Plan begins the process of rectifying this long history of segregation in Upper Northwest with recommendations that will result in more equitable outcomes. It's this mission of supporting affordable housing in Ward 3 that propelled me and others to create the Washington Interfaith Network's Ward 3 Upper Northwest Congregations Affordable Housing Work Group that I co-chair along with Barbara Kraft. We comprise faith-based congregations in Ward 3, including Addis Israel, Temple Sinai, St. Columba's, Chevy Chase Presbyterian Church, and National United Methodist Church. And we have been building support for affordable housing here for the last 2.5 years. WIN is a multiracial, faith-based citywide organization, and we seek to build support for positive community change in DC. I've also been a member of the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan Citizens Advisory Committee and involved in the community planning process. I want to note the critical involvement of our ANC 34G and other organizations such as Historic Chevy Chase DC and Ward 3 Vision. I also want to thank Councilmember Che for the role she played both before and throughout the process of this small area plan. Central to the plan are the recommendations that commit us to affordable housing and the racial equity and diversity it will eventually bring to this community. Specifically, a Chevy Chase redeveloped library and community center with the addition of affordable housing must have a minimum of 30% affordable units as part of the district's goal. And since this is public land, it is a good site for the Housing Production Trust Fund to create a mixed income housing with a larger percentage of dedicated units that are affordable to the very low and extremely low income households. The plan now has stronger language for property owners when redeveloping to incorporate a range of household sizes and serve a range of incomes with priority for housing units at or below 40% of the MFI. Actualizing this plan will require new and creative financing tools and robust council oversight. The plan seeks to increase density, add mixed income housing, provide dedicated affordable housing units, and opportunities to purchase. It takes a bold step to undo exclusionary housing practices in Chevy Chase and create more equitable development in our community, and I urge you to vote for it. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Donald Kahn.
Mute.
Mr. Kahn, if you're on mute.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Councilperson Che, our greatest Commissioner Speck, and Commissioner Gosselin. I live near Connecticut Avenue. 4 apartment buildings along Connecticut Avenue are adjacent to my side yard. We share an alley. I know the avenue. I also been the treasurer of 5431 Connecticut Avenue. I've also been the treasurer of a condo with 15% deeply affordable units. I know the nexus of success in the community in the economy of scale needed in an apartment community. I have significant and deep experience in all aspects of apartment cost management and operations of these types of units. My experience represents unique and applicable lessons learned. I am also a retired program manager. I also served as a member of the Racial Awareness, Social Equity Housing Subcommittee. Okay, and I hope that the council will respect my point of view based on my experience. I'm here to oppose the plan and will propose simple alternatives associated with the SAP and reasons for the council to reject the SAP. I oppose it for 4 reasons. 1, lack of community support. 2, the plan content adds nothing of value beyond the comprehensive plan. 3, if approved as legislation, the consequences of the plan are far worse than not having a plan. Number 4, most importantly, our neighborhood character and cohesiveness has become a sandbox. Okay, here's more detailed reasons for my objections. Number 1, the plan includes both special zone and PUD in the same plan. Does the council understand that the use of special zones is designed for and is only useful for DC plans that define a city within a city, such as Walter Reed? That's not Chevy Chase. Special zone was added into the plan for the following reason. The plan area as defined in the comprehensive plan is unsuitable for the small area plan. The SAP says the plan area is unsuitable for the plan. Also know that PUD and special zones are mutually exclusive plan solutions. They are not a mix and match. In its current form, the ingredients of developer heaven. Number 2, the plan fails to address affordable housing goals consistent with the mayor's Rock Creek West development plan. A real example of failure is 5333 Connecticut Avenue. To meet the mayor's housing goals, that building would need to be 4.5 miles long. As mentioned, I was also on the Racial Equity Standing Committee. And unfortunately, the Housing Committee did not propose any plan related to housing goals. Only 2 people, including myself, were advocating for this new Green Deal and achieving detailed goals related to affordable housing at the library community complex. To that end, I remain completely frustrated, underscoring the lack of purpose and substance in the SAP. Next reason, the CAC member selection and operational effectiveness were seriously bad. No time to explain here. Number 5, the SAP draft and final process lacks sufficient logic. Content included citizen comments, an ANC resolution, the mayoral hearing content. At least 95% of the comments were not considered. The sheer length is over 2 times the width of the SAP. Has the council ever seen over twice the width of comments compared to the SAP? Independent oversight of this process is needed. The draft to final change control identification process is horrific. Has anyone in the council tried to locate a comment-based change from draft to final? What if the council approved law in this manner? A complete diligence failure, completely unacceptable. The transportation plan is at best confusing, calling for both dedicated bike lanes and bus lanes and improved bus service. Need I say more, but time does not allow. The lack of community support remains the most troubling, unique aspect. Based upon surveys, it's estimated that 70% or more of the plan area community opposes the plan. No reasonable effort was made by the ANC, the CAC, nor the OP team to gain community support. Roughly the same 100 people showed up at all events, and they talked at each other versus to each other. We have about 15,000 residents in ANC 3-4G. The pandemic did impede communications, but that did not, for reasons unknown, cause a reasonable pause in this effort. In fact, the key charrette event was sacrificed. For the reasons above and many others that time does not allow, the SAP should be rejected. The council can act to vote down the plan now or have the community via ballot process decide. Bottom line, the library community housing complex represents the sole viable affordable housing opportunity. The current plan offers no successful economic development model for the commercially owned plan areas. The next major plan period is 2025. If viability is a real part of the SAP approval process, if numerous plan improvements and process are made by OP, if this legislative process becomes far less than a clock running out process, then we can perhaps make another run at a small area plan. Our planning process must contain comprehensive and viable affordable housing programs, one of which is the Green Deal. Much more end-to-end diligence is required before the next plan process is started. The plan will move us from a distant worst plan to be rejected to a best plan. Our neighborhood character and cohesiveness has become a sandbox. We should exercise more care and importance.
Mr. Khan,
yes, thank you.
I let you go over, but you're 2 minutes over.
I'm sorry.
Donald Crane.
There we go. Okay. Good day, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Che. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input. My wife and I selected Chevy Chase for our home because it was welcoming, progressive, and has a village ambiance, a distinct village ambiance. Notwithstanding many aspects of the SAP that we strongly support, our view is that it fails to address adequately the many issues that could have an impact on our community. We offer these comments constructively and believe it's a balanced and deep community involvement going forward. The plan is vague. We strongly support affordable housing as we value diversity. We think this is a first step toward addressing a deeper issue in our society, and that of gross economic disparity. We do note that, and I serve on St. Columba's steering committee and am deeply involved in efforts for affordable housing at all levels. But we note that assurances to proper oversight of deeply affordable housing is crucial to avoid problems with programs that lack the essential wraparound services essential for public safety and the welfare of those with serious behavioral challenges. We think that this is important and one of the details that the plan should address. We support construction of a new library and community center as a functional and attractive anchor for a revitalized corridor. A more attractive and pedestrian-friendly streetscape on the east side of Connecticut Avenue would be positive, with improved landscaping and dedicated space for outdoor dining, pop-up markets, and community activities. These objectives should not be accomplished by high-rise buildings with minimal affordable housing and out of scale with the neighborhood, or by displacement of existing businesses. Allocating deliveries and traffic to alleys and side streets with elimination of surface parking will have a deeply negative impact on safety and livability for neighborhood residents. Overly increased density, as implied, presents major infrastructure challenges that are addressed superficially. Parking problems will be exacerbated by the loss of existing surface park lots and an increase in population. Suggestions as to alternatives are not convincing and are not adequately dealt with. Local residents will continue to need to drive and park. as will others. Public parking is also crucial for businesses, and homeowners adjacent to the corridor will be deeply affected, as they could be pushed off their own parking by their homes by the limited availability for others patronizing the area. The infrastructure issues are not dealt with. School overcrowding will likely increase, and other aspects of the infrastructure will be stressed. Modest increases in building heights and footprint could mitigate, but not entirely resolve these concerns, as well as protect the characteristics of the neighborhood. We appreciate recognition of the need for architectural standards and appropriate transitions to residential zones, but think that this needs to be taken seriously and requires community input in implementing these guidelines and in zoning decisions to protect the distinct character of the corridor. A poorly implemented plan, particularly with excessive costs for new construction, could jeopardize the value of our cherished small businesses, such as Child's Play, the fish market, the shoe repair shop. We support the concept of public-private and not-for-profit involvement rather than purely economically motivated developers with very little concern for the neighborhood. A balance should be achieved that accomplishes social objectives, builds community, and retains our distinct character. Social objectives, including affordable housing. The concerns above were noted by many residents throughout the development process, but did not inform the proposal to the council. We ask that these issues be addressed and not homogenize the Connecticut Avenue corridor. We can formulate a plan that accomplishes the defined objectives, benefits all stakeholders, and avoids collateral problems to the area. Thank you again.
Did that nurse ever come, Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Crane. Robin Diener. Robin Diener.
Hi.
Good morning. Or good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm Robin Diener, the director of the Library Renaissance Project. We've been watching library matters for close to 20 years here during the incredible renovation, transformation of the DC Public Library System, which thanks to you council members for all of your support for so many years. Regarding the Chevy Chase small area plan, for us, the most important matter is that the public land remain in public hands. So that would be the civic core of library and community center. Plans, the SAP calls for a land disposition, and we oppose that. Not only can we not risk another West End giveaway worth something like $48 million per DC government's own valuation that we received nothing for, but also we would have sold it for probably more like $60 to $90 million, according to area comparables at that time. So the mindset that every blade of grass must be monetized is archaic, and it's morally bankrupt. Public lands serve purposes that can only be measured through intangibles. With regard to keeping civic and private uses physically separate, at Chevy Chase, we have enough land to publicly owned land to keep the civic uses separate from the private and residential uses. Now, Ward 3 Vision presented a concept plan supporting that structure of, if you will, so the community center and library together, surrounded by affordable housing. It shouldn't be a choice. We shouldn't have, several choices on this as it's presented in the plan. This choice to organize it this way must be mandated by you if you accept this plan. Sorry, okay. Perhaps no one could predict that we would have birds in the West End Library coming through the curtain between the library and the patio of the coffee shop next door. Also, an indoor garden that was promised for public use, but which, as built, just leads to the private residential lobby, and so we don't use it. These are design mistakes that could be fixed, but who will pay for them? who makes the decisions about shared walls in a public-private partnership? I'll tell you, everyone's favorite governing entity, a condo board. So the West End Library, everyone should realize, is a publicly owned condo in a privately owned condo building. Well, there are problems that we did predict. Everyone knows about the flood from a private residence in the West End Library over the library, which caused the public space to be closed for 5 weeks. One owner's private space in that large luxury building affected the public space used by thousands of people. It's closed for 5 weeks. Back when the West End giveaway was being plotted, we raised the possibility of such problems. We were told that we were absolutely insane, that leading edge alarms and protections we put in place to ensure something like this would never happen. And obviously they did happen. It didn't, we weren't protected. And whose fault is that? Was it the developer, or was it a lack of oversight by the library? I mean, how would we even know? And if you don't believe me, please be persuaded by the award-winning architect of the MLK Library renovation, Francine Hubin, who recently said in Architecture Magazine that she was pleased and relieved when DC Public Library dropped plans for housing over MLK. So in case I haven't been clear, just keep the housing on the public land separate from the library and community center. And so finally, please let this plan call for something different in affordable housing, something visionary, not the same failed IV and 3P boondoggles. Developers don't have our interests at heart. Interim director of OP, Anita Kozart, told us in a conversation with the Wardman group that the developer of the Wardman chose not to take up various incentives for affordability offered by the city. So then what the heck? Social housing comes to mind, is something we could do as called for in the New Green Deal. So let's go to that. And in addition, this is perhaps irrelevant to this hearing, but more immediate opportunities exist. The Southwest parcels, we could take back McMillan. And by the way, I spoke to Mayor Bowser about eminent domain for the Wardman, which it is not too late to exercise. Fair market value has been established. She said, Robin, have the council send it to me. So if we want to do the Wardman, let's move. But pursuant to this hearing and Chevy Chase, we have the land. So let's do it right. Thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you, Ms. Keener. Ryan Keefe. I believe Ryan Keefe is not here. Ellen McCarthy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ellen McCarthy. I have lived in the study area for more than 34 years, 5 houses west of Connecticut Avenue, and have been a professional planner for more than 45 years. I served on the Community Advisory Committee for the plan, and I wish to offer my broad support to the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan. The Office of Planning has undertaken this effort under extremely difficult positions due to the COVID epidemic, despite having no model for conducting a small area plan virtually and having to deal with bulky technology. OP made considerable efforts to gather community input. In addition to online surveys and community sessions, OP also participated in numerous in-person outreach efforts and community events such as the very well-attended Chevy Chase Day and others that I list in my testimony. In addition, groups like the ANC, Historic Chevy Chase DC, and Ward 3 Vision organized more than 20 opportunities to get more information about the issues involved. I'm pleased that the SAP provided such close attention to urban design issues. The neighborhood enjoys a very high quality of life, and any prospective new development understandably generates a fear of reduction in that quality, but focusing both on how to make the public realm along Connecticut Avenue even better and on how to effectively transition between the rear of new development along the avenue and the single family residences that are adjacent is very important. The design guidelines associated with the plan provide a great base for a new zone to codify those guidelines into design standards, a new zone that was called for in the plan. Along those lines, I also appreciate that the plan has some renderings of what potential new development might look like. In my experience, very few lay people can translate between two-dimensional plans or three-dimensional massing diagrams to understand what such development will feel like. I only wish there had been more resources available to the Office of Planning to do more such renderings. The recommendations to achieve more affordable housing are extremely important. One of the most important areas of consensus, and I would say broad consensus, that has been achieved through the plan and previous work of the ANC is the need for redevelopment of the library and community center to include more affordable housing. Since that is the only publicly owned land or city-owned land in the corridor, it is our only chance to achieve affordability at lower levels of affordability or higher levels of affordability, as the case may be, in addition to the new library and community center. But I urge the council to stay on top of the district agencies that are involved to speed up the issuance of the RFP for beginning this effort. It doesn't seem to have been accelerated, considering how important that is for the creation of affordable housing along Connecticut Avenue. It's very important that it get a shot in the arm to accelerate it even further. I applaud OP's responsiveness to the comments that the community made. They were very extensive, 4 pages of responses to the community's comments during the public hearings on the plan. In short, the planning process was inclusive. The recommendations are strong, especially with regard to the creation of more housing of different types and affordability levels, and outlines important urban design guidelines that enhance the pedestrian character of the retail along the neighborhood. Last, I've tried to keep this short given the time limit, but I would like to associate myself with excellent comments from Ron Eichner that you will hear later and the comments from Cheryl Court at the beginning. And last, I'd like to say to Mary Che and to Randy Speck that I want to add my comments of appreciation for the outstanding models they have provided of inclusive elective leadership. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. Lee Schenecker.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Shea, other members of the council who may be listening. My name is Lee Schenecker. I am a retired urban and regional planner and former member and chair of ANC 3G. I live 3/4 of a mile east of Connecticut Avenue, down McKinley, across Nebraska at 5543 30th Place Northwest, where I've resided for 45 years. I definitely support the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan and believe that the district's Office of Planning has done a good job, both in process and substance. However, I do have one very important concern. And what is that concern? Is the 2-acre district-owned site where the community center and library now sit large enough to accommodate all that is planned for that site? Based on my urban planning experience in various parts of the country, particularly concerned with right-sizing a project for a given site, and just as importantly, my 45-year use of the Chevy Chase DC Library and Community Center on its present 2-acre site, I am skeptical that this 2-acre site can handle all that is planned for it. My understanding that it would include a new library, a new community center, housing including a substantial number of affordable housing units, an underground parking garage, continued outdoor recreation, and per the SAP, adequate step downs to protect the immediately adjacent residential neighborhoods. I raise this question realizing that 6 to 8 story buildings are anticipated and that there will be lot line to lot line construction. It is also my understanding that should the council approve the SAP for Chevy Chase, then what I have dubbed a detailed activity analysis will be entered into for each new public building and perhaps anticipated housing sites on this 2-acre site. Should the detailed activity analysis, if it becomes reasonably clear that the present district-owned 2-acre site is not adequate to accommodate all that is envisioned for it, I would suggest the possibility of crossing Northampton Street, east of Connecticut Avenue, and put one or more of the public uses on this cross Northampton Street site. Uses might include either the library, community center, or parking facility. That in turn could free up a lot of building footage on the existing district-owned 2-acre site and provide a lot more space for housing, including affordable housing for families. Now, I suppose a lot of people would ask, what are you talking about? That Northampton site, north of Northampton site, is privately owned and there's already a bank building on it. My response would be, if you're talking about the commercial retail housing transformation of Upper Connecticut Avenue, you have to be bold and realistic. I would like to divert from my transmitted written testimony and further bear down on the 2-acre site. Again, I think the OP has done a good job on the overall small area plan as a plan for the 4 to 5 block area. But the problem lies with the district's 2-acre site. It is not being treated or soon to be in the planning stage, such as the rest of the 4 block area. Rather, in effect, it is at the programming, budgeting, and implementation stage. And therein lies the problem. We need to know what type of library we're going to have in the future. What are the activities of the community center? How much housing will there be? At what MFI will it be at? And if it's at what FMI, how many families can be in that affordable housing? And finally, I'm told by ANC Chair Speck that will be underground parking on this site. If so, where's the capital budget for the same? These and other detailed questions need to be answered to ascertain if, in fact, the 2R district site can handle all that is being programmed for it. Mr. Chair, Councilman Shea, that is my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schoenecker. Let me see, I do have some questions and I'll see if Councilmember Che has any questions. Although I'm not quite sure where to begin. I think a number of the comments that are critical of the plan seem to be critical that the next steps have not been taken. Just thinking about what Mr. Schoenecker just said, that if there's going to be underground parking, well, where is it in the capital budget? This is an instance where the plan is preceding other actions, and therefore it doesn't work that the other actions would have occurred. I think I heard the same thing with regard to housing, that one of the witnesses said something about, well, you know, there needs to be, the plan fails to address the wraparound services that are essential for public safety. But the plan is a document for the physical changes to Chevy Chase, not addressing, it's not the program that comes out of a completely different agency, let's say Department of Human Services, that would provide the wraparound services. I think there was something similar to that effect with regard to the disposition requirements, but the disposition is also a separate process, and these things can't all happen at once. This is kind of what my reaction is to the testimony that I've heard so far. I'm not sure who would want to speak to this, but well, maybe I'll recognize you, Ms. Wasserman.
Thank you. I'm glad that you articulated your reaction. I disagree. I think that a plan should in fact precede the detail. And so I accept that, what you said. But the problem with this is it's not a plan. It is a shiny object. It took what the overall zoning of and plan of the district for like corridors like Connecticut Avenue as a given, and that would be of right. So you're talking about buildings along this small area that is Chevy Chase, DC, that of right could be 5 stories and more, dangling the hope of affordable housing if they go higher. But what the SAP did is and I think OP staff did a wonderful job of outreach. I don't agree that there was no outreach. It didn't really reach people about what was involved here. But it took that as a given, and then it illustrated what it could look like if you applied certain design principles. So in my mind, as a planner, as an environmental professional for many, many years, it's not real, even as a plan. It's not real in that it didn't examine infrastructure. It didn't examine the reality of what an area could, in fact, capacity. It dealt with no numbers, and it doesn't reflect the climate change, the really affordable housing needs, and the wraparound services. It's not a plan. That's the problem. A plan, yes, and then you want to go on next steps. But when you're dealing with zoning that is going to drive of right development, what effect will it have?
Well, let me cut in there. So if we want to get more housing, one of the ways we get more housing is we provide more density. And you're speaking to along Connecticut Avenue, increasing the allowable heights to 5 stories. So that would be increasing density. The way development occurs in the city is pretty much analogous to a public-private partnership. We say we want housing, and then it's up to the development community whether they will come along and be interested. If we only say 4 stories, that affects the economics. I'm not here to say that the economics don't work, but less density, given the value of the land, cost of construction, it may not be feasible. So I'm guessing that is part of OP's thinking with 5 stories. But if we don't say, okay, 5 stories, then we just say current zoning, the only way you're going to see more housing would be, or more development that presumably is housing, is if a developer comes along and takes the chance of an upzoning for a particular parcel. That doesn't seem like a very good approach. I think it was in your testimony you talked about the need for wraparound services.
No, it was Don Crane.
Okay, but that's something that just doesn't happen through the zoning process. That happens through a separate process. And I don't know that there's the comprehensive plan or the small area plan could try to speak with more specificity with regard to, let's say, wraparound services for extremely low income housing, but that's not binding. It's I think the word is precatory. It's just a statement. The only thing that with the comprehensive plan, I said this when the comprehensive plan was before us a year or so ago, the only thing that's really binding in the plan is the zoning part, because it says zoning shall not be inconsistent. The Home Rule Act says zoning shall not be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. So these other issues, they're important. They get addressed through other processes. Whether they get addressed correctly or not, I get the anxiety level there, but there's not a way to do that in a binding way in either the comprehensive plan or the small area plan. I don't know if that was completely responsive to what you said, Ms. Wasserman, and I need to be mindful of the time, but do you want to come back?
Well, if First of all, I do support affordable housing, and I do support changing from the existing for mixed use, because that leads to vibrancy. And I'm concerned about our existing small businesses. But I think if you're really going to plan, there's no reason why you want to make Chevy Chase DC look like the rest of DC. In other words, there's a character that I think we all want to preserve in the process. And so if you're going to vision a future, if you're just saying we need more housing, increase the density, increase the density, and that's it, then we had that with the citywide zoning and plan. When you're looking at the application of future visioning for this area, I think you have a lot to lose. You have a lot to lose with the existing situation. We need to develop. There's no question about it. And mixed use and vibrancy and reconsidering transportation, all of that is fine. But I'm not sure that, in fact, this dance with the developers where we rely on this dangling of some incentive for affordability just with greater height, and it won't even reach the needs of affordable housing, that there are other tools in the toolbox, like using our public property. I agree with Lee Schoeniger that I think we're asking a lot for that space, and why not take over the bank with eminent domain and really create a campus for affordable housing that would also respect the needs in terms of transportation, consistency with the plan itself talks about the west side. Again, I'm on the east side, but the west side has more historic value. So why not set up more limits on that and develop the west side with these new design parameters?
Let me regain some of my time, and I see.
All right, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Gosselin, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let me try to address the point you're making in three ways. First, you mentioned we're talking about 5-story buildings. Well, you understand that nowhere during the process, and not in the document you have in front of you, are 5-story buildings mentioned. We might infer them from the pictures, but our discussion, essentially 3/4 of it, more than that, probably 85% of it, was devoted to a discussion about planning at an extraordinarily abstract level. And only in the last few months were there even any pictures shown. And as I say, if you look at the document before you, you will only find actual numbers for height on 2 legends and just as illustrative. Number 2, I just say, is part of our effort to improve the conversation during the planning process. We invited the people from neighboring jurisdictions, planners from neighboring jurisdictions. So we looked at a plan covering a similar size parcel in Alexandria. The plan goes right down to the very basics. It tells you about a bump out, window size, and so on and so forth. We see none of that in this plan. I understand the distinction. Finally, I just say I understand the distinction you make between sort of social services or capital budgets to come and what can be dealt with in a plan. But one of the things that I think has frustrated this neighborhood is that there are issues that take as long to develop, for example, new schools, as do any construction that would be come in tandem, that would come out of this plan, any housing construction, for example. And so the notion of saying, well, we'll put that off until we got the plan, means that we're always going to be behind on all the infrastructure issues unless they're developed with the plan. And that did not happen in this case. I hope that helps.
I'm sort of out of my time. Let me turn to Councilmember Che.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of points I want to pursue. Two witnesses said that there's lack of community support for the plan. In fact, Mary Rouse said that a majority of the Chevy Chase residents oppose the plan. So that's one thing. And two, Mary Rouse also said that the plan was railroaded through, among others, the ANC. So first, I'd like to ask those who said that a majority of the residents oppose this plan, how is it they're measuring that? How do you know that?
Let's see. This is Ron Kahn. I did refer to a percent of the community in the plan area. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yes.
Okay. And I came up with a 70%. We did an original survey back at the end of 2019, which outlined the preferences or the desires of residents in the overall ANC area. And there were a number of responses in terms of support, for example, of exactly how affordable housing would work. And there's very little support of that. That was in like 27% supported it. And there were no details, later on developed, but it was a substantial majority against that, which is really the main thrust of a lot of the SAP. The other one was we did a community survey a little bit later on where we got over 500 signatures against various aspects of the SAP. Then later on, actually a couple months ago, we did another survey within the 4-block area, and we did a special 1 block, knocked on every door and got the survey results back versus people have to walk a long way to put back. And it was between 70 and 80% against the SAP. So we have multiple instances. I wish we would have surveyed the neighborhood and had an accurate thing, but the ones that the citizens put together give us a very solid feel for that amount of opposition.
Could you provide to the committee these surveys and the numbers and the particulars of them? Could you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Should I send them to you or?
No, you send them to the chair, and through the chair, I can see them.
Okay.
And then Mary Rouse, you had said a majority of the Chevy Chase residents are opposed to the plan. What is the basis for your conclusion on that?
Okay, well, first.
Well, I haven't got the extensive survey results that Ron did, and I appreciate what he has done. I moderate the community listserv and am in a position to see a tremendous number of comments from a lot of people and probably read it closer than almost anybody else. And I can say that as a former ANC commissioner, I'm well aware that our community has roughly about 14,000 people if we've got 7 commissioners. And I can say that, in talking to some neighbors, we're doing outreach on the historic district. And I can just tell you in just a small area that we're looking at for the historic district, there's so many people who just are not aware of what's happening. So many people very frustrated. A woman called me the other night and said, I'm just so frustrated. And I said, well, I'll bring you a copy of the small area plan so you can see it. She's a longtime activist in the community, but she had, for a variety of reasons, many of us are busy with lots of things. And I just don't think this is ready for prime time. I think that we need to respect the fact that those who are happy with the process were those who were involved in it, the members of the CAC. I was not allowed to be on the CAC. I moderate the listserv. It's a 21-year institution in the community. Supposedly institutions in the community were supposed to be considered for involvement, but I was never asked. And I think that many people feel that they were left aside and not their views not considered. Many comments were made.
Okay, so actually, I'd like to, first of all, I want to distinguish between not being aware and being opposed. But in any case, Commissioner Speck, could you address these, criticisms that A, majority of the people oppose, and B, that the particularly with the ANC, and the ANC are commissioners are supposed to be the representatives of the community, that the plan was railroaded through. Could you speak to that?
Councilmember, we had meetings regularly. In fact, I think we talked about the small area plan at virtually every meeting in 2021 and 2022. We had multiple meetings that were open to the public and public participation on a whole variety of aspects of the small area plan. We held, I believe it was 9 information exchange programs. We did extensive outreach, and Commissioner Goslin was at the forefront of that. He did a lot of effort in his SMD, particularly on outreach. We never are able to reach everyone. That's been a traditional problem, but I think we did as much as is physically possible in this instance, and we got a lot of comments. As someone mentioned, I think the same 100 people tend to show up at all the meetings, and that's true. The people who are involved tend to stay involved, and other people who are not involved get left out. But it's a choice that a lot of people make, I think. With regard to the survey that Ron Kahn mentioned in 2019, if I'm remembering that correctly, I believe that was with regard to the comprehensive plan, and it was for a completely different purpose and didn't have really anything to do with the small area plan per se. And it did ask some questions about affordable housing and other issues. And affordable housing, as I recall, although it wasn't the highest on everybody's list, it still ranked pretty high in terms of the number of people who supported it. So, and again, the 7 commissioners heard a lot of comments from a lot of people. I personally read all of the posts on the listserv about the small area plan. And so I think we heard all of the comments from the community, and we took that into account when we passed our resolution.
Thank you for that. And I see some other people want to chime in here, but before they do, I want to make sure I make a point before my time expires. And that is, as I said at the outset, and in agreement with, for example, you, Commissioner Speck, and others, that there is a need to actually amend the approval resolution to be specific and explicit about the need for ANC participation in the implementation. I think that's vitally important. So thank you for that testimony. But going back to this other issue, to the extent that I have time remaining, somebody put in the chat, somebody said, I live nearby, but I was never surveyed. I live within 4-block area and no one ever offered to survey to me, but my window's not quite open. So somebody said that, but in any case, I'm going to close that window. Was it you, Ellen? Oh, okay. And so that was you. In any case, I'd like to see what these surveys are, because first of all, they may have had a different purpose. They are of different dates, and I'd like to see what the numbers are. Were they made available to you, by the way, Commissioner Speck, these surveys?
No, they were not.
Okay.
This is Ron. As a clarification, there were petitions signed. There was a survey done earlier on in 2019. I do want to make one recommendation to clarify, to clear all this up, if I can. Am I still being heard? I'd like to have a survey done right now of the community in terms of support or non-support. That will clarify exactly what we're talking about, and you will not have to speculate. That has not been done, and that needed to be done. Why can't we take the effort to survey the community in terms of their support or lack of support right now of the plan? What are we afraid of? I think that would definitively help us in determining the community support of that plan.
I don't know that anybody's afraid of anybody here, Mr. Khan. I did have Mr. Commissioner Speck and others reviewed the outreach that they conducted. And also, let us not forget your ANC commissioners are your elected representatives. So if we're not going to give great weight to what their conclusions are and their efforts are, then, we should just have, Massachusetts style, raise of hands democracy. But in any case, I only have a few seconds left. I see one hand, and first hand I think went up was Jamie Butler. So you'll get the last word on this.
Okay, thank you. I just want to offer an observation about the petition and the way in which people were given information. People choose whether they want to be involved or not involved in their community. You can reach out as much as possible, whether it's through Mary Ross's listserv, which doesn't reach everyone. And there are people who choose not to be on it because they don't particularly like the way the discourse unfolds in it. That's their options. I know somebody who was given that petition. She chose not to be involved in the small area plan. And when she looked at that, it was so negative that she got frightened. She thought our community would be turned into Friendship Heights. So I think when you put together a petition that is biased, and then you frighten your neighbors about what might happen around them, you get people who are concerned. I still believe that it is not a majority of people who are against this. I would say that OP could have done a better job at the beginning, getting information out to the community to say we were launching this. Peter did his best to try to let people know in the impacted area that this was happening. He went door to door, as everybody said. And, after that, how much are you going to keep going after people to be involved? Randy Speck and our commissioners worked hard to get the word out. Mary Rouse put things on the listserv. So I think now grousing and trying to get us to start doing this all over again. I mean, we've been at this longer than OP had planned, and they extended deadlines, doing their best to accommodate the community. So I really wouldn't support going out for a community survey to delay this process.
Thank you. I'm over my time. So, Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you. And I might give you some more time in a few minutes because I think I'm going to say a little bit more. No, I will give you additional time because I'm going to say a bit more. First of all, Commissioner Speck, Chairman Speck, I'm advised by staff we may not be able to amend the resolution. The Home Rule Act does limit the ability of the council to amend certain resolutions, and this may be one of them. And what does that do with regard to the ANC's position? Because you wanted us to add 2 paragraphs to the resolution.
Is there no way, I believe as you introduced this discussion today, you said that the council can change the small area plan. You can accept it or you can modify it.
No, you can approve
I assume
or disapprove.
Well, I think you said modify in whole or in part.
Yeah.
And what I would suggest is that whether it's through the resolution or an amendment to the SAP or however you want to handle, we need that additional assurance that the ANC is going to continue to be involved. It's just not clear in the SAP that we're going to have that continued involvement.
Yeah, well, I'm going to argue with our general counsel, but what I'm being advised, and I haven't talked to our general counsel yet, but it's not unusual, and I'm being advised by staff that we may not be able to amend the resolution. So we could put language in the committee report. The way this process is set up, and I might be going into more detail than I need to here, is that we adopted the comprehensive plan as an act. We can do almost anything by act. The comprehensive plan specifies, and the law actually provides, that there can be small area plans that are approved by the council by resolution. And that's where the constraint comes in. And so that's why I was asking the question. And if you want to talk to your fellow commissioners and get back to me on this, that would be okay. But we may not be able to actually put it in the resolution.
As I understand it, the resolution is proposed by the mayor.
Yeah.
And I would think that the council is not just obligated to either an up or down vote on that.
Yes.
I hope you will. I hope you will talk to your general counsel and figure out a way to do this. What we want is, and I think it's very important, but I think it's clearly doable, is some direction to OP that they are going to continue to involve the ANC at the earliest stages in this implementation process. And we just want to make sure, as everyone I think today has expressed, that the community continues to be involved in this process. And I think OP would be willing to do that, but we need that kind of assurance.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, could I interject
Yes.
just 1 second here? Check, of course, with general counsel, and then we can see. But then also you mentioned putting something in the report, but also couldn't we, now it doesn't have the same standing, but couldn't we also adopt a sense of the council resolution that would be read, as we say in law, in pari materia with, together with this, and that would could accomplish it as well? Just an idea. I'm sorry, I intruded on your time, but I wanted to.
Yeah, we could, but of course it's not binding, and we could also do it by act. And I'm not looking at the language that the ANC submitted, but we oftentimes will put in act that the executive needs to do certain things in coordination with the community, or needs to listen to the community, and we know how that plays out often, which is that it doesn't happen. The goal here is to get the Office of Planning to work with the ANC and for the ANC to be very much involved. I'm going to read the language that's in the statute. It's DC Code 1-306.03, subsection C4. If the council does not approve or disapprove the revised small area plan in whole or in part by resolution within this 45-day review period, the revised small area plan shall be deemed approved. So we don't, under the law, we don't have the authority to modify the plan. And this goes back to home rule interpretation. And this is what I'll press our general counsel on, that most resolutions that come from the mayor, we cannot amend. So that was what led to that question. I wanted to say this about processes. I've been listening to some of the discussion and Councilor Chave's questions and some of the answers. So there was quite a bit of discussion about the Chevy Chase small area plan when the comprehensive plan went through the council, which I believe was in 2020 and 2021. I mean, quite a bit of discussion. So the public had an opportunity at that time to be aware of the impending small area plan. And then the requirement for the small area plan is one that requires the mayor to have a hearing. And there was a hearing by the mayor. And then the ANC had its process. And I can't speak to how many times the ANC notified the community or what kind of participation from the community, but for sure, before the ANC adopted its resolution, it had to give notice that it was going to be taking up the issue at its meeting. I do not know to the extent to which the Chevy Chase Citizens Association has been involved with the small area plan, but I can't help but think that regardless of how many people have actually commented, that the process itself has been public, and then we're having this hearing today, the council is. So I'm just tossing that out in terms of the opportunity for the public to know about and to speak out with regard to the plan. I'm trying to I'm looking at my notes here, what else I want to ask about. I think actually I'm going to punt for a second. Councilmember Che, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't, but I do want to just underscore the idea that there has to be an avenue, some better than others perhaps, for us to memorialize that we want the ANC involved in the process early and often in the implementation of the plan. But I have no further questions.
I'm just looking at some of the testimony. I'm going over some stuff I covered in the first round, and I apologize for that. I will ask Office of Planning about its analysis of infrastructure because several witnesses testified about that, such as transportation and other infrastructure. But issues such as community involvement with the zoning decisions, that's part of the zoning process and wouldn't be something that we would additionally require at the council because it's already required to the zoning commission. I think the same comment came up with regard to the disposition. If there is a disposition of the land, I'm thinking of Ms. Diener's testimony. So you may think that the development of the West End Library was unsatisfactory, but that really comes to the implementation stage, not at this point where as a concept in terms of planning, we would say we want to see a dual use at the current library site. There was testimony regarding that you can't mix, I'm looking at the language, special zones with PUDs, but that happens all the time in the land use process.
Mr. Chair, may I talk about disposition for a second?
Yeah.
So we were actually advising that there be no disposition at this point, and since this SAP calls for it, it shouldn't be approved. You talked about
the time for us to not
is done in the District of Columbia, and that hasn't worked for affordable housing. So here we have this public land. We have a huge directive from the public at large to deal with affordable housing. We have the social housing or the new Green Deal bill.
Yeah, but let me interrupt you. We've disposed of a lot of land for affordable housing. I'm thinking of St. Elizabeth's, for example, or Walter Reed. So you can't just say as a blanket matter, it hasn't worked. The question is, if the disposition were to occur, now it's a public process, so the council could say no when a disposition comes to the council. But to say up front that the only way that that land could be developed with a library and housing is if the government were to actually fund it?
Yeah, we have the money. Why can't we do something different? Because I disagree with you, Chair. It has not worked.
Well, the district hasn't built public housing.
Given away, we don't have a significant amount of affordable housing at all levels.
The district hasn't built affordable housing like public housing in decades.
It doesn't have to. You hire someone to build it. How do the libraries get built? How do schools get built? And that's a red herring. I don't get that argument.
The district has not hired somebody to build public housing in decades.
But why not? Why can't we?
It's besides the fact that our capital budget is completely maxed out, it may not be the most economical way to get affordable housing.
Well, as I said, with public land, it is very hard to measure the economy of it. There are so many, quality of life things that need to be considered, health outcomes, educational outcomes, crime reduction. And I don't know that anything that we're doing at this time is significantly succeeding. Why not try something different? Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
I'm being more generous with time here than I should be. Lee Schoenecker?
Yeah.
Oh, I think you just froze. Can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me say this with regards to the people who say the process didn't work. I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with what the Office of Planning did. I think they had all kinds of sessions, this, that, and so forth and so forth. Mr. Speck and I have talked about the process. And I have suggested that there be a meeting at the Chevy Chase Center. He has felt that since the Chevy Chase Center did not have a way of getting to people virtually, as has been done over the last 2 years, that it couldn't be done. I think that to a substantial degree, Mr. Goslin, Commissioner Goslin, others are probably correct. I say probably, that the ANC itself has not really taken into account the direct participation in the community center of people within 2 to 3 blocks on either side of Connecticut Avenue. Now that's just the way one commissioner, one who served 30 and 40 years ago would have done it, versus how you do it today under totally different conditions. But I tend to agree with things like what Mr. Goslin is saying. There should have been more direct public participation. I'm saying it should have been done in the Rock Creek Center. Again, different chairman, and I was chairman 30 and 40 years ago. So different folks have different strokes, okay?
Thank you. Commissioner Goslin?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, I want to align myself with my chair, Randy Speck, and with Councilmember Che in saying there's got to be a way you can memorialize the idea that that the ANC in the community continues to have substantial involvement in this. To the extent our ANC has an agreement about anything, it's on that. And with regard to this issue you just raised before you recognized, Mr. Schenecker, which that the zoning text changes and so forth are a zoning commission process. I think what we're asking for here is involvement with OP in drafting the designation language for the zone for the Upper Connecticut Avenue corridor. And if I understand the zoning process correctly, OP drafts, gives it to the zoning commission for consideration, and then the zoning commission process is then tripped on so that then the zoning commission takes it and does hearings and so on and so forth. I worked hard on an alternative resolution for our commission, during which I talked to a lot of land use lawyers, and it sounds as if there's a process before it gets to the zoning commission and turns into a formal zoning commission procedure where we could be involved if you encourage the executive and OP to let us be involved, and I hope you will.
Thank you. Councilmember Che, do you have anything else? She may have stepped away. I'm going to thank each of you. One of you did not give us a copy of your statement. If you would do that, please. And I want to thank each of you for your testimony. You all are excused. I'm going to call the next 12 witnesses. Beryl Benderly, Andrea Rosen, Christine Gray, Robert Stern, who's with the firm Stern, Kessler, Goldstein, and Fox, Ronald Eichner, Mara Verheiden Hilliard, Corinthia Simmons, Carolyn Cook, Robert Gordon, who's president of the Chevy Chase Citizens Association, Lee Mayer, Steve Seelig, Jordan Benderly, and Michelle Wolin. Beryl Benderly,
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Commissioner, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Che. My name is Beryl Benderly. I have lived on Patterson Street, a block and a half off Chevy Chase Circle in the SAP area for 48 years. I sent my children to Lafayette. I want to say that I consider approval of this plan or so-called plan as absolutely, completely premature. I've heard about the supposed efforts by the planning office and the ANC to reach the community. I expect maybe there's sincere, but their efforts, in my opinion, abjectly failed, in part because of, mainly because of, or perhaps mainly because of the pandemic. The Zoom meetings were completely unuseful. And most people I speak with in my neighborhood have no idea that this is going on. Honestly, they have no idea. And that is a failure of the ANC and of the planning office. My ANC commissioner, I've sent her detailed comments and I've not had the courtesy of a reply. I'm here as a neighbor only. I'm not a city planner. I'm not a lawyer. I really know nothing about how the district government works at a technical level. But what I am is a senior citizen, and as are 34% of the residents of the plan area, according to the plan. Other 56% in total are over 50. The number of adults over 69, of which I am one, has doubled since 2010. And this, I believe that the plan is completely disregards the interests of two groups, us, the seniors, and also the children, and I'll explain. First of all, if you look at the plan, it talks about the bike lanes. Well, the bike lanes are immensely controversial in the neighborhood, as is this plan. And you can see I'm nervous. I've never testified before. If you look at the plan, now the plan seems to assume the bike lanes. Now, if you look at the plan and what the plan seems to be telling us about the buildings, although it's very hard to tell, as previous speakers have said, because there's no detail about what's going to be built where. It appears to take all the surface parking, or virtually all the surface parking, in the Connecticut Avenue area. Now, the population I've described is very unlikely to start biking to go to Magruder's or to go to Safeway or to go to CVS or to go eat dinner. I have not been on a bike in 20 years, and I don't intend to get on a bike now because I can't risk a fall. So I think that that is a very serious drawback of the plan and is going to have a tremendous impact on people who live here. We're talking a lot about housing people who don't yet live here. Now, if this is senior housing, then that's going to impact on those people too. If it isn't those people, if they like their houses, their apartments, will stay here a long time and they'll get to be elderly also, if they're lucky. And that's the one thing. The other thing is the school, which is central to the culture and sense and ethos and experience of living here. Our beloved Lafayette School is overcrowded. It was renovated a couple of years ago and expanded. It's twice the size it is when my kids went there, and it's still overcrowded. And if these new homes are successful, they'll bring families, and those families may have children, and those children will need to go to school. And I don't know where they're going to put them. Lafayette spent years with demountables around the school. I don't know, maybe they'll go back to demountables, but that, as an ordinary citizen, I just think that needs to be considered. One other little thing is that I would mention in the civic core, the basketball court and the playground. My son spent countless hours on that basketball court. That is the most socially and racially integrated place in this neighborhood, because young men, generations of young men of all races and creeds have played basketball together there and still are. And now older people are starting to play pickleball. There's also a wonderful little tot lot for little kids, which I take my little grandchild to pretty frequently. He doesn't live in DC, but whatever. And one final point I'll make is the plan talks about
Ms.
extending.
Benderly, you're 2 minutes over your time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I would just say that bringing the bike lanes into DC, into Chevy Chase Circle, is an invitation to mayhem, honestly, to death. If anyone's ever driven in Chevy Chase Circle. Thank you. I'm sorry to have gone over.
And I don't have a copy of your statement. If you want to provide it, please.
Okay, thank you very much.
And actually, somebody asked earlier, the email address for the committee is cow@dccouncil.us.
Okay, thank you.
cow@dccouncil, so 2 C's in that, dccouncil.us.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to have gone over.
Andrea Rosen.
Hi, my name is Andrea Rosen. I'm a Chevy Chase resident. Thank you, Chair Mendelson and Councilmember Che, for holding and attending this hearing. By resolution in 2020, ANC 34G linked its support for a higher density designation on the comp plan's future land use map for Upper Connecticut Avenue with a request for a community-led small area plan. The resolution argues that a SAP is needed because OP's blanket increases to the density designations do not provide adequate guidance or specificity and will not give the community adequate input. My written testimony lists the resolution's salient priorities. Was the small area plan the community-driven process asked for? Was it shaped by the principles articulated by the ANC and the public? I would say no. The process was planning theater, and the result could have been produced without expending time or money. OP relied on social media to reach residents and business owners rather than mailing to each household and business, which meant that thousands were left out of the process. We are kept better apprised of leaf collection schedules than we were about the redevelopment of our main street. OP convened a community advisory committee comprised of residents on whom it could count for support, or at least to not push back. Over the months it met, the CAC ended up not so much advising OP as being re-educated. OP went through the motions of outreach and took hundreds of comments, including on the draft SAP, which I hope you'll read, to produce an aspirational sounding puff piece that echoed some of those comments, but supported them with little specificity and few mandates. The mandates that are included ignore, even reject community goals. In its resolution on the draft plan, the ANC requested that OP delete equitable housing strategy paragraph 4.4, yet OP doubled down on it in the final version by changing encourage to pursue the conversion of naturally occurring affordable housing to dedicated affordable units. Connecticut Avenue has both rent stabilized and naturally occurring affordable homes that rent at below market rates, and both are vulnerable to conversion through vouchers and covenants. The ANC specifically prioritized protection of existing affordable housing. Instead, OP plans to codify robbing Peter to pay Paul. Otherwise, the SAP treats affordable housing summarily to be addressed in some fashion on the public land, and elsewhere, the two types of IZ are meant to suffice. The SAP waves off ensuring schools and parking adequacies, population increases notwithstanding. Locally owned neighborhoods serving retail is mentioned as valued by the community, but given the specs that the SAP recommends for newly constructed retail spaces, they will be priced out even if they survive displacement. In an unprofessional admission, OP avoids acknowledging that much of the study area has been deemed eligible for historic district designation, and that in fact an HD nomination is underway. Instead, the SAP kicks the compatibility, scale, and character work down the road and firmly into OP's court. We are to get a new zone for Connecticut Avenue, quote, drafted and proposed by OP. The ANC is dismissed to play its marginal role of carrying great weight before the Zoning Commission, where the die will already be cast. Thus, we have come full circle with the community sidelined, OP's blanket upflumming unfettered, and redevelopment enabled. The resulting small area plan with its lack of real community input, granularity, and enforceability is a plan without a plan. And I ask you not to dignify it with passage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosen. Christine Gray. I'm told she's not here. Robert Stern. Is he here?
God, Robert Stern, come
on. Ronald Eichner.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Shea. I'll do my prepared testimony, which is more of a 50,000-foot look at this, even though there are a lot of details that need to be corrected. Perhaps we'll get to that in the conversation afterwards. I'm a 47-year resident of Chevy Chase, DC, and I've been deeply involved in the Chevy Chase, DC small area plan process, as well as the prior review of the comp plan amendments and the ANC 3-4G racism task force. So I'm familiar with the issues and the discussions that have been going on for the last couple of years. I'm wholly supportive of the plan drafted by the Office of Planning, and I look forward to its implementation. I understand there's always resistance to change among a certain segment of the population, even when that change is very modest, as it is in this plan. That's the way it's been for decades in Ward 3. But it's troubling that in 2022, there's still resistance to building in a smart growth manner, which is the most environmentally responsible and socially equitable way for a city to grow, to say nothing of the quality of life and economic benefits of modest increase in density that result in our streets becoming more vibrant and home to new residents to fill the restaurants and shops. There's talk about how the Office of Planning has been unresponsive to the community. As someone who's been in the thick of this effort, and as someone with some expertise and experience in these matters, I'm a planner and a developer, I'm comfortable stating that this is just not true. Virtually all the substantive comments made by the community, such as maintaining charming existing streetscapes, creating a new zone with form-based codes for guidelines, pursuing a co-development of the library and community center with affordable housing, focusing new development on the east side of Connecticut, and eliminating references to other initiatives outside the study area, were all comments that were incorporated into the plan. It's not insignificant that the opposition that you've heard rarely mentions specific substantive points, but focuses on process arguments. Some requests that were made for direct ANC involvement in highly technical tasks, such as writing zoning regulations or determining the precise levels of affordability in new buildings, were made, and OP wisely noted in their response that the ANC will review and comment with great weight, as is already provided for, as these activities proceed. To me, the well-intentioned idea that the ANC be directly involved in these tasks is evidence that some do not appreciate or understand the highly technical nature of these tasks, and it's almost reason enough for everyone to just stay in their lane in the next phases of work. The ANC and the community absolutely must be at the table. I'm totally in agreement with that. Reviewing, being consulted, having input, etc. And I hope a transparent process can be designed to allow that, but everyone should understand and agree that the small area plan is the starting point. And much of this study and planning is behind us now and does not need to be relitigated in the implementation phase. It's time for the professionals to do their work. And I hope that Chairman Mendelson, you'll ask Director Kozar when she testifies about having the ANC and the community involved in that process, because it's very possible that this whole hullabaloo is just a non-issue, and the OP is perfectly comfortable involving the ANC in this next phase of work. In closing, I congratulate our Office of Planning for a job well done under very trying circumstances, and look forward as a community member to having input into an innovative form-based code for a new Connecticut Avenue gateway zone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eichmann. Mara Verheyden Hilliard.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Che. I am Mara Verheyden Hilliard. I am a more than 50-year-long resident of the District of Columbia and this neighborhood. I grew up here. I returned to engage in my civil rights and constitutional rights practice. My son is a DC public school student, and I am very disturbed by what has transpired here. It is really an emperor has no clothes moment. Everyone who's attempting to say, just go ahead and agree with and endorse this plan, it'll all be sorted out in the wash later, is putting us on an extremely dangerous trajectory for an outcome that will destroy a singular opportunity to build meaningful, affordable housing in this neighborhood, and to reject the legacy of racist displacement that is Chevy Chase. The Chevy Chase small area plan, currently proffered to the council by the mayor's office and the Office of Planning, has materially failed to comply with obligations as to community input, and the DC Council must reject this plan and require the OP to revisit the process and comply with its obligations to DC residents. It must meaningfully respond to and incorporate their input and community comments, including requirements for affordable housing. The written comments that were submitted to the OP in the process, including hundreds of comments in the design phase, were thoughtful, detailed, overwhelmingly in opposition to or offering substantive rejection of plan specifics. And those comments are available online, and they were entirely disregarded by the OP. So they are viewable by this council. This plan provides no meaningful requirements for affordable housing development. No proponent of this plan can point to any meaningful requirement for affordable housing. They are only using the words as window dressing. And it is the height of disingenuity to claim that the very developers who have destroyed affordable housing in DC and through racist gentrification have forced out families who have lived here for generations are now going to suddenly create affordable housing in Chevy Chase of their own volition. And government officials should not simply beg developers to create much needed affordable housing. The district government has the ability to mandate it, to structure it, and even to build it. It is particularly outrageous to listen to developers cloak themselves in the mantle of affordable housing as a false justification to rezone, upzone, and open up hundreds of thousands of square feet in Chevy Chase to expensive luxury housing instead. This plan should be forced to return to the planning stage to incorporate the coming crucial policy changes in the district offered by Bill 24-802, the Green New Deal for Housing Amendment of 2022, which has majority support in this body. Why is there such urgency to jam the small area plan through now? The plan and its process have been rife with improprieties. It's been egregiously pushed through without regard to democratic obligations in order to execute a land grab for developers who are going to profit off of opening up wide swaths of Chevy Chase to dense luxury housing. The mayor's office and her developer backers, who will profit hugely off this initiative, have falsely claimed repeatedly that the effort supports affordable housing, but it does not. That is the single basis upon which this plan is being jammed through, and that basis is demonstrably false facially in the plan. The plan does not mandate or require any meaningful affordable housing. That is a fact. And the plan lacks any granular detail or mandate. It is unlike any other small area plan encountered. It doesn't comport with what an SAP should look like or include. So the argument that this is just a start and other crucial matters will be dealt with later defies the SAP process and the entire point of an SAP. This plan is simply a cloak of graphics and permissive language to get to the end goal, an authorization for increased height and density that will eviscerate the neighborhood in order to build more luxury housing apartments. And it will extinguish the opportunity for truly affordable family housing and for social housing that exists in this moment. The council must reject this plan, stand up for affordable housing and social housing, and stand up for fundamental democratic principles that were entirely disregarded in the process. As others have talked about, community input was silenced at meetings. Meetings were held with failed technology that didn't allow persons to communicate. And where people did contribute, those hundreds of written comments that were offered were fully disregarded. Even the ANC failed to provide the community with advance notice and dissemination of its final proposed resolution on the plan. It circulated and drafted its position behind closed doors and issued it only at the last minute at the time of the ANC meeting on it without circulation or notice to its constituency. Everybody listening here today knows how powerful the developer interests and developer money are in the district, including as presented through their AstroTurf organizations and incentivized individuals masquerading as community groups or community representatives. Those interests also gained access to the Community Advisory Board for the SAP that was not offered to community and affordable housing advocates. We have a once in a several generations opportunity to change the racist housing legacy of Chevy Chase and to create meaningful, affordable, and family housing. And this plan, if allowed to go through, nails the door shut on that opportunity. I urge you to reject this plan.
Thank you. I don't have a copy of your statement. Can you provide that?
Yes, and I will be submitting the statement and related information today.
Thank you. And the address is cow@dccouncil.us.
I have that, thank you.
Corinthia Simmons.
Yes. Hi, just a quick note. I have my 3-year-old son, so he may be making a lot of noise in the background. Thank you for the opportunity to testify at the committee's hearing on the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan. My name is Corinthia Simmons. I am a part of the ANC's Racial and Social Equity Committee, but today I'm testifying in my personal capacity. A little bit about me. I have lived in 4 of the 8 wards in DC, and I currently have a 3-year-old son. I currently live in Ward 3 on Connecticut Avenue, right in the area of the Smart Area Plan. I moved to Chevy Chase because at the time I could not afford to live in Ward 5. The pricing in Ward 5 basically put me out. And so Chevy Chase was actually the most affordable place for me to live at the time during COVID, and I moved here. Shortly after I moved, I noticed that the city was beginning feedback sessions on the small area plan, so I decided to join. Previously to working on the SAP, I participated in the Office of Planning and the development of the Edgewood Community Center. I participated in all the feedback sessions offered by the Office of Planning for the small area plan. I think that small area plan is a good plan, and it considered all suggested feedback that I provided. I actually saw a few things that I suggested in the plan. I'm looking forward to a new community center, a new library, and the development of affordable housing. During one of the feedback sessions held by the Office of Planning, I took my son and his stroller to the community center, and neither one of us could fit in the community center elevator to go up to the 2nd floor. We don't utilize the Chevy Chase Library as often as we should, unless to just pick up children's books, because it's not feasible for my 3-year-old son. We do better at the NOK Library. We don't use and engage in the park that's behind the Chevy Chase Community Center because it's not safe and it's definitely not feasible for my 3-year-old son to play in. And then my last point is that I think that all of DC is changing. As I mentioned, I lived in 4 of the 8 wards here. All of DC is changing, and I don't think it's fair for all of DC to change and Chevy Chase not change to fit into DC. We are one city. And so I urge the council to approve the small area plan. I urge for true affordable housing to be a part of the plan. As I mentioned before, I moved to Chevy Chase because at the time of the pandemic, it was the most affordable for me and my son to live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. And we don't have a copy of your statement, if you could provide that.
Yes.
Thank you. Carolyn Cook? I don't think I see her. Robert Gordon?
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Che. My name is Robert Gordon, and I'm the president of the Chevy Chase Citizens Association. I participated throughout on the Community Advisory Committee to the SAP. We oppose the plan as currently written unless significant changes are made. And I hope this is not a moot point at this time. We support the ANC 34G's request to participate in all phases of the future planning and implementation of the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan and its amendment presented by Chair Speck. The ANC was instrumental in initiating the SAP, requesting and obtaining the funds to execute it and participating fully in the process. We believe that the ANC, as elected representatives, is in the best position to ensure that the voice of residents is heard and incorporated in future actions. We want the ANC to be part of the discussion of all design decisions as we move forward. We have 2 caveats. We believe that the SAP will fail to reach its goals of promoting greater inclusivity and affordable housing for families in Chevy Chase. No economic analysis was performed in the development of the SAP to determine the feasibility and relative costs of family-sized affordable housing in Chevy Chase. We recognize the regrettable consequences to minorities of public land grabs, exclusionary zoning, and redlining in the area. The SAP will not remedy that appalling history. Given the high land costs in Chevy Chase, will developers build family-sized affordable units in Chevy Chase? Is it proper to invest district funds in overly expensive housing here? 5333 Connecticut Avenue is a prime example. The 20 affordable units there are generally too small for families. They are below ground level, have been hard to fill, and even so, they're relatively expensive. We asked the council to commission a study to look at the cost of building family-sized affordable units in Chevy Chase compared to similar financial investments elsewhere in the district. The SAP assumed from the outset that Chevy Chase was a highly desirable place for candidate families to live. There is no evidence of that. OP didn't bother to look at the demand side of the equation. Do families eligible for affordable housing want to live in a small apartment in a mixed-use building in Chevy Chase? We ask that the council remedy this oversight and ask these questions before approving the plan. The second, a large section of the Chevy Chase SAP is devoted to urban design guidelines, otherwise known as form-based codes, which appear to be a promising approach to design in the future Chevy Chase commercial area. This is highly significant. Deeper examinations shows that form-based codes are experimental in nature. The language was clearly prepared by developers for the benefit of development interests. Form-based codes are used very infrequently in cities across the United States and not in any residential neighborhood in Washington, D.C. Form-based codes promote a uniform set of structures that take control out of the hands of city agencies that normally manage, approve, planning, and monitor construction. Uniformity may not conform to the west side of Connecticut Avenue. Recall that most of the current Chevy Chase residents like the village feeling and walkability along the west side of Connecticut Avenue. Adopting four-based codes wholesale needs more study, thought, public education, and community dialogue before it is included in the plan. Until more is known about form-based buildings codes, we urge the council to suspend this portion of the SAP. And finally, we are opposed to the notions of general density and missing middle in Chevy Chase, which has been implied in the draft SAP and may be introduced later. These terms, while sounding benign, but mean greater density and eventually upzoning in residential streets. We oppose further actions in that regard. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input to the process.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gordon. I don't have a copy of your statement either.
I'll send that on.
Please. Lee Mayer.
Hello, my name is Lee Mayer and I live on Western Avenue Northwest in what used to be Ward 3 and is now Ward 4. I'm a former ANC commissioner and a bicycle rider. Like my Ward 4 neighbors in Barnaby Woods, Hawthorne, and parts of Chevy Chase, Connecticut Avenue is my main street. I shop at the stores on Connecticut Avenue and frequent the bars and restaurants there. We Ward 4 residents located west of Rock Creek Park were not fairly represented in the SAP planning process. As City Council representative, Janice Lewis George should have been a major stakeholder in the development of the SAP. She was not. Additionally, the fact that this hearing is taking place with less than 30 days notice, the day after a major holiday, tells me that this plan is being rushed. There appears to be no real coordination between the Connecticut Avenue Protected Bike Lane project and the SAP. Specifically, the goals of the SAP are at odds with the Connecticut Avenue Bike Lane project. Bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue will result in more traffic and gridlock. Bus service will be negatively impacted. This is before any new residential buildings will be built. Emergency response times, ambulance, fire, and police will increase and potentially cause loss of life. The SAP doesn't provide a mechanism to adequately address these issues. SAP benchmarks include a welcoming public realm that enhances the accessibility and safety of users, particularly older adults and persons of disabilities. This is according to the June 2nd booklet. The elimination of 2 lanes of vehicular roadway and the removal of parking on one side of the street means less accessibility for seniors and persons with disabilities, not more. 2 large Chevy Chase, Maryland residential projects are being built on Connecticut Avenue. The 4-H site and the multiple apartment and condo buildings off Jones Bridge Road. The impact of these developments on Connecticut Avenue needs to be factored into the SAP. To my knowledge, they have not been. The ANC 3/4G resolution that was passed stated, and I quote, the CCSAP must address more specifically how infrastructure, schools, transportation, and parking will be planned concurrently with any new development on the Connecticut Avenue corridor. Whatever growth may occur in the Chevy Chase planning area cannot happen without accompanying infrastructure, and there must be a plan to make that happen, end quote. The Office of Planning has conveniently watered down this vital part of the recommendation. The residents of Ward 3 and Ward 4 west of Rock Creek Park need a greater voice in determining what this infrastructure will look like. In summary, I'm not against the recommended growth in housing, especially affordable housing at the community center and library. However, when growth occurs, parking must be retained and expanded in order to meet the demands of existing and future residents. Parking is especially important for those of us who are in Ward 4 and seniors. More time and constituent input is needed to address the issues that increased growth will bring. Bike lanes must not be installed on Connecticut Avenue. The impact of residential projects on Connecticut Avenue and Montgomery County need to be factored in. I and my fellow Chevy Chase residents are not against change or growth as some have portrayed our neighborhood. However, unregulated growth will result in chaos. For these reasons, I urge you to reject the SAP that is before you now. Thank you. If I can just veer off for just a second about public input. A lot of the hearings have been taking place during the pandemic where parents are trying to figure out Zoom school meetings. There's a lot going on in the neighborhood as relates to the bike lane project, the SAP, the development, the historical district, the Episcopal Center for Children's School. And all of this is going on simultaneously. And to expect the residents to manage all of this and full-time jobs and school with children is a bit unrealistic given the timeframes that we've had to work with. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve Seelig.
Hi, Chairman. Hi, Mary. How are you? Sorry I missed both of you at the funnest part of your job, the Palisades Parade yesterday. I'll get you next year.
Well, we were there.
I must say that
we were there. Were you not there?
I know we were doing vacation stuff. Sorry. Anyway, I know it was fun. So I got to say also, and I haven't written my comments down yet, Chairman Mendelson, because I've been taking notes today, but I'll send those to you. And I guess I must be part of one of those AstroTurf groups because I actually am a member of Ward 3 Vision, in addition to Ward 3 Bike Advocates. But I'm here testifying on my own today. And I don't often quote Ronald Reagan, but I think it's apt to say, there you go again, regarding a great deal of testimony that we've heard today, urging the council to do anything other than adopt the proposed SAP. Don't forget, this SAP was put in place as part of the comprehensive plan. Mary was asked to do so. Chairman, I know you were acquiesced to her putting that in, and we got this funded and we've got an SAP. This happened, the process happened. OP did the best that they could under the circumstances. They responded to the council to put this thing together, and it's there, but still, it's not enough. It's not enough for the opponents. A lot of folks have testified they want to continue to be involved in the process going forward, from specifically telling owners what they can and cannot build from a design standpoint, to the old saw, hey, just lop off another story. And that's going to be the right height for what I want there to be in Chevy Chase. Although I personally don't agree, Mary, with your proposed amendment to permit the ANC to continue to have involvement with OP and the future zoning changes, I understand it's a compromise position. But I certainly don't want a small group of people who claim that they know what's best for Chevy Chase to hijack this process even further, even further. It's going to cause unneeded delays and arguments about this, that, and the other thing, further delaying the process. There's a process in place for the ANC to comment, and it's when the Zoning Commission has presented those changes that they have great weight in weighing in on that. I guarantee you, no matter whether the ANC is involved in the zoning process, in the special, more advisory process, whatever comes out will still not be enough. It won't be enough. I'd like to make it clear that the Office of Planning listened to every concern that was put forth by all the neighbors, and I mean all. Generally speaking, a lot of folks don't have time to show up at this roundtable. We tend to see the usual suspects, kind of like Nate and some of the others, who have the financial freedom to show up during the day. But any indication that the voices you're hearing today were not heard is simply not true. A lot of voices were heard. OP made its decision in the most democratic way possible by taking careful notes and weighing the equities. And I don't even want to go into some of this stuff about the 70% of residents who are opposed and the like, and that Mary Rouse somehow knows the truth about what it is that people in this area know. She actively bans people from her listserv who don't agree with her anti-growth agenda. I'm one of them, and there's many more of them too. So I just want to comment on this affordable housing issue, because I hear virtually every opponent talking about this issue about affordable housing, but vote against the SAP. And we'll deal with this at some point in the future. And that's just, that it defies logic to believe that. You can't have it both ways. You can't not build more housing, and you can't then expect there to be more affordable housing. So it's disingenuous, so some of these comments. I wrote down something about Mr. Gosselin's testimony. We'll get through with that. But I want to say one other thing, and this is to the chairman and to Mary. Listen, I feel a sense of deja vu here all over again, okay? Didn't we just go through this same process before, where single family residents in Cleveland Park argued that they should continue to have the absolute authority over what happens on both Wisconsin Avenue and in Cleveland Park, because that's how it's always been. And that's what I hear a lot of this testimony saying, that we know better, no change. That idea was roundly rejected by the city council. And I hope that the committee of the whole and the city council adopts this SAP and moves forward as promised. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seelig. Jordan Benderly. Is Jordan Benderly here? I don't see him. Michelle Wolin. I know I saw.
Hello.
Michelle Wolin.
Hi.
Please.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for this hearing. I would first like to say I'm going to depart from my prepared remarks somewhat, because I want to go back to the question that Mary Che asked about community input. And I will simply say, in response to the last comment, Mary Rouse does not kick off people with opposing views. We have people with different views on our listserv. Ron Eichner is a regular contributor. She does kick off people for abusive behavior, and I will leave it at that. Okay, so first of all, Chairman Mendelson, you started saying that the small area plan is a community-informed vision. And I think that actually what has happened with this is that it's been more of a Ward 3 vision. I've been following this for quite some time. Initially, with the ANC discussion of the comp plan and bringing in a small area plan, they had meetings. I am never going to say the ANC has not been transparent, but I do think there has been a failure of outreach and to inform people of these monumental changes, possibly monumental. Let's just say the most consequential changes to our community that I've seen in my 26 years here. With respect to the comp plan, there was a task force, and then the small area plan was proposed. Very, very few people in the community were paying attention to that. At one point in the task force meeting, they mentioned, we had an ANC meeting. We had 26 attendees. And that is typically what you get with our ANC. There's very small attendance. It's the same people over and over again, which, is just how it is. People here are incredibly busy living their lives, raising their kids, doing their jobs. They don't pay attention to the ANC. So the SAP comes along, and I was one of the people that was involved in circulating the petition that we circulated last spring or summer, in which the petition simply called for, we want a community-driven process, not an OP or developer process. It did not scare people. You will eventually see the petition. It was not a scare tactic. Some people may have interpreted it that way, but it wasn't. But it did bring up, we wanted a plan that was based on authentic community input, and it expressed concerns that it would be removed, the SAP would remove needed parking. It would allow for construction that would not be consistent with the existing scale and village feel of Chevy Chase. It envisioned hundreds of new housing units without corresponding infrastructure investments and addressing school overcrowding, endangering our small businesses, and the fact that how much affordable housing would really be built. Much of it was going to end up being very expensive housing. So I was distributing this, and as I was doing so, usually I was just leaving it in mailboxes, but I would talk to people when I would see them in their front yards. So I've talked to quite a few people in the community about this. There are certainly people that are in support of as much development as they can get. But I would say the ratio, in fact, I counted the last time when I was distributing the petition for the historic district. I'm sorry, not for the historic district. We did another petition for the just within the SAP area. We did that this April. 10 people did not want all the development that is envisioned in this. 2 people did. And that was incredibly consistent with what I found over the summer. And people are not opposed to all development here. We're fine with some development. We're fine with affordable housing, but they don't want it to be to the extent that this is calling for. And I'll get into that more in a minute. But with respect to outreach, throughout the summer, last summer, Peter Goslin was intent on having a community meeting with residents. And he was pursuing this. OP put up some roadblocks. There was an issue of finding a place and then an issue of finding a facilitator. Peter can give you more details on this, but he was pursuing that like into the fall, but it never happened. And I think we got another COVID upsurge, and maybe that's why it died. I think also just logistics of it proved to be too difficult. But that was supposed to be on the books for a long time. The community meeting never happened. And Peter did it in the hopes of getting community input. And he had the somewhat, I think, much overly optimistic goal of reaching consensus. I don't know if that would have been possible, but that's what Peter wanted to do. So that didn't happen. That fell away. There was also talk at a meeting or a mention by, what's his name? Commissioner Higgins. Well, perhaps we should do a postcard to everyone to inform them of this, because let me go back. When I was talking to people with these petitions, no one knew about the small area plan. No one knew what was going on. The comp plan, people didn't know about that. The degree to which people do not follow these local events is astounding. Lots of people don't even know who their ANC commissioner is. Anyway, where was I? So, so Commissioner Higgins suggested maybe doing a postcard so people will at least be aware of what's going on. That never went anywhere. I've attended virtually every single ANC meeting over the last few years because of this small area plan. Believe me, I have other things I'd rather be doing, but that's what I've been doing. I have repeatedly said in the chat and to the commissioners, you need to do more community outreach. I have said it repeatedly. And at one point, I believe in the fall, maybe beginning of winter, Chairman Speck said, there will be time to get the community input. Well, it never happened. And the problem with what OP did, their surveys were skewed. So if you didn't want all this development, there was no place to say that. And secondly, in their visioning workshops, which I attended several, I will say again, in each of the workshops I attended, there was maybe one person who was gung-ho for as much development as possible. And everyone else was very skeptical of this and didn't really want to, what you hear over and over again, we don't want to ruin our village feel. I spoke to I certainly don't know what went on in every visioning workshop, but I spoke to others, some others who were in different visioning workshops, and they said the same thing. A majority of the people did not want this much development. I even spoke, I want to keep this on the wraps. I spoke to an official who was at many of these visioning workshops who said the same thing. What I'm hearing is most people don't want this. And if you look at the online, I'm sorry.
You're 3 minutes over your time.
Oh God, I haven't gotten my prepared remarks. Okay, so I'm happy to talk about this more, but unfortunately, there has been a failure of community outreach. One thing I do want to talk about,
Ms. Wolin, you've been 7 minutes.
Oh, I've been 7 minutes. Darn, I haven't gotten to anything. Okay.
No. And I don't have a copy of your statement either.
Yes, I haven't submitted that yet. Okay, I'll just say parking matters. I'll submit a statement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn Cook, have you joined us? Yes, I see. If you could testify.
Yes. Hi. Okay. Let me just still have the prompt to start my video. Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson, for hosting this roundtable. I'm going to veer off my remarks to just say that you have done a project that can have the greatest potential of harm or good, depending on how this city handles it. I am a Chevy Chase, DC native. My mother came here and father in 1964. This is incredibly personal to me. And I have been writing this, I read and have been writing this all day long. I have 10 pages of testimony, obviously too long. But what I want to say to you that's really clear is not a document that engaged this community. And the proof is actually, if you look at the document, if you look in the back at the council representative that was acknowledged, where is the Ward 4 representative? Under the Community Advisory Committee, again, where is the Ward 4 representative next to Mary Che? And as I scanned down the list, I noted that there wasn't a single Barnaby Woods advocate or representative. I was an ANC representing Barnaby Woods and Hawthorne, and I was never asked or appointed to this special committee that was hidden from the public view, who never posted its meeting minutes or the outcomes of its meetings or any of the feedback that the community of advisors had, nor did they solicit any input from the community. My biggest problem today, and why I'm asking you not to take a vote on this and to do the council's due diligence in holding the Bowser administration accountable to taxpayers who live in Ward 3 or Ward 4, as the case, is this simple postcard. This was sent to me during the small area planning process by two realtors to announce that Chevy Chase neighborhood would be featured on WIDA TV show If You Lived Here this Monday night. Now, my address is on Barnaby Street, but even these two realtors could look at the map of Ward 3, and even though I'm in Ward 4, I would be a stakeholder who would be interested in a program about Chevy Chase, DC. I would like to know, as a former ANC commissioner, chairman, when DC government was no longer required to provide 30 days written notice to the public with government action that was going to impact them, because we never received even a mailing, a simple postcard like this from Office of Planning or our ANC, I will add, that said, here is the website. We are going to be doing a major development project, even we call it a small area plan. This is of gigantic proportions to this neighborhood. Here's the website for more information. Here's a list of meetings, anything, nothing. So I would argue that the majority of constituents of yours as our at-large chairman do not know anything about this. Look at the numbers reported for their meetings. I am appalled to see that, where was it? Let's see, okay, so 1.4% turned out at the kickoff meeting. 4%, the highest number that participated in this whole year-long process that OP went through, 4.5%, 568 respondents to the online visioning survey. So assuming at the beginning of this process, but then look at this, it drops down to 1/3 of the businesses on the one day that they were invited to add input to something that is going to change their business model drastically and their customers' ability to access. 1/3 showed up on the one day. And then finally this, 215. So 215, this is less than half of the respondents from the initial online visioning survey actually came back on to complete the urban design survey. And then at the final last community open house with the plan to make comments on, 90 people showed up. Chairman, if this was a document and a plan that this community supported, don't you think it would have had more attendance than that? 90 people is nothing. And so when I look at this, what is being called a small area plan, I think this is a set of aspirations. This is Mayor Bowser's goals, that she is putting a one-size-fits-all requirement on Ward 3. It feels a lot like an axe to grind. But what I want to say, that what makes Chevy Chase in particular deserving of a lot of scrutiny and far more testing and far more analysis of the objections that have been obtained just with the small pool of people that happened to be on Mary Rouse's listserv, because that was the only format that we were communicated with. And if you didn't have a computer and you weren't online, or you don't know how to use Zoom, which is plenty of seniors in our community, which I'm sure you know is the highest concentration of seniors, you weren't able to participate in this process. So when I look at this, I say great aspirations, but where's Barnaby Woods and Hawthorne, Chairman? We live here too. You guys, 20 years ago, cut us out of Ward 3. Maybe it was intentional with this plan to dilute the white or middle class vote in this area so that we wouldn't be able to fight this. And hey, it worked, because we are a divided community. We have Councilmember Che accountable to her folks that vote for her, and Councilmember Janice George, I'm very sorry to say, has been missing in action this entire time. And the proof is in the pudding that her constituent newsletter has not contained any information about this. And last Friday, under her legislative updates, didn't even note that she was going to be taking a vote on the small area plan for Chevy Chase. I am appalled, having been a champion of trying to reunite Ward 3, recognizing that we were going to be left out of the equation in Ward 4. And I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt as a brand new council member, but even after our attempt failed, Chairman.
You're 2 hours, so two minutes over your time.
Fair enough, but she has never come and asked for what the objections are for the few of us in her district that actually know about this plan. And I believe that that's why Barnaby Woods wasn't represented and acknowledged as part of this plan. So I would just ask you today to consider the fact that this postcard could be sent out by Office of Planning now.
Ms.
At the
Cook,
stage.
you're now 7 minutes.
Okay, but at the stage we are in.
Ms. Cook, thank you. Everybody had 4 minutes. I've allowed people to go over.
You know what though,
I
Chairman?
politely suggested
It's
that you were
people's
over your time,
lives.
but I will add this as well. Several people, including you, have made some, I would say, personal innuendo, which is really not appropriate in the public space. I would just say that. I would add as well, whatever council member chooses to do, the fact of the matter is that Connecticut Avenue is squarely in Ward 3, and there are folks who live in Barnaby Woods who are very much affected by Connecticut Avenue. I don't want to dispute that at all, but Connecticut Avenue is in Ward 3, which is probably the reason why the Ward 3 council member is the one who's been most directly involved. I will be looking at the testimony with regard to the substantive comments, with regard to the small area plan, and I appreciate the testimony in that regard. With regard to process, as I noted earlier, the existence of or the desire for a Chevy Chase small area plan was something that was discussed rather extensively when the comprehensive plan was before the council in 2020 and 2021.
Before the
So
pandemic.
the public has been, the pandemic occurred in 2020. The need for, desire for, existence of, impending nature of the small area plan is something that was discussed publicly at several council hearings, as well as several meetings of the council and the committee of the whole. In addition, the city is required to give the ANC 30 days notice, which the ANC clearly had, and the ANC had a number of public meetings, which was an opportunity for public comment. In addition, the mayor had a hearing, and in addition, there was, I'm looking at my notes here, there were many opportunities for the public to get involved. So if the criticism is of the process, that there was no public process, I would add as well, this has been in the DC Register. Now, whether folks think that there was enough opportunity, I'm not speaking to that, but whether in fact the law with regard to public notice was followed, I would say it was more than followed. Councilmember Che, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to hear all the witnesses, and I did. And so I want to thank all the witnesses for coming forward and testifying today. Thank you.
Councilmember Lewis George, you've joined us. Do you have anything you want to say or any questions you have?
Thank you, Chairman. I did want to say a few things. Oops, so sorry. This is my office's current setup. I wanted to, thank all the witnesses who took time to join us today, but also those Ward 4 residents who have come forward and spoke. I think it is, undeniable that the Chevy Chase Connecticut corridor, while not located in Ward 4, is, an anchor of Chevy Chase and Barnaby Woods and Hawthorne neighborhoods, which I'm fortunate to represent. I think the redevelopment that will be happening there in the coming decade impacts the interest and quality of life of all of my West of the Park constituents. And with so much opportunity to really reimagine affordable housing in a resource-rich neighborhoods, what happens in Chevy Chase will, I hope, set a standard for what it means to be intentionally developed for inclusion and equity. I was able to follow, and my team was able to follow a number of the Office of Planning meetings since I've come in, and our team, and I know Office of Planning team has been a part of the public, worked with the input process, but also had to be innovative and adaptable to the COVID pandemic. There was a multiple sort of episodes of pandemic that they had to respond to, and we understood in that piece. I know some have expressed concerns today over the level of engagement, and this is something I have heard from Ward 4 constituents. So, we must continue, I think, to be mindful of conducting robust engagement throughout all of our processes, not just this process, including engaging residents in the eastern portions of Chevy Chase and Barnaby Woods and Hawthorne. I think mail, robocalls, text messages, the flyering, these type of things that we know have worked in the past and actually worked when we were doing a lot of COVID work, which we were doing simultaneously over the year, trying to get people to get vaccinated, and COVID was also a part of it. So I think we've learned ways in which engagement can happen more robustly. I have included in my newsletter the Chevy Chase when there was planning meetings, and also any input and any times there was availability for people to engage with our ANC commissioners. I think there is no secret that that Chevy Chase origins do have, as we learned at the Lafayette Pointer, there are some origins in housing discrimination. And this legacy meant opportunities for home ownership or even rental were out of reach for Black Washingtonians for nearly a century. And as we look into the future, I think we have an opportunity to remedy this harm by ensuring the creation of housing that is affordable to the average Black family in DC. And so I commend the Office of Planning and the neighbors of Chevy Chase for taking this matter to heart. I think we spoke a lot about it at the Chevy Chase Pointer opening about this history, and then we talked about what needs to happen to make that difference. And this is about remedying what we've seen happen in the past. I was excited. I'm excited about the proposal to bring housing to the reimagined civic core of Chevy Chase, and want to echo some of the comments today that maximize affordable housing development affordable housing development must be a priority on this site and throughout the small area plan. I think some have already brought up the Green New Deal for housing at this hearing. And I believe that by piloting a social model here on public land, we can achieve an even more ambitious affordable housing goal. I think the bill I introduced envisions generating closer to 60% of housing units as deeply affordable. And to that extent, there are other opportunities for the city to, I think, supply housing stock along Connecticut Avenue corridor beyond just the civic core. I think we should. And so I think social housing could go well beyond the IZ plus generated affordability and allow the city to simultaneously invest in ground level retail for early childhood programs or for auxiliary pre-K classrooms to relieve some of the overcrowding at Lafayette and the overcrowding we know that's going to come because of what we know from planning and families expansion here in our corridors. While I support much of what is put forth in the small area plan, I appreciate the input from residents today requesting additional ambition and specificity in the plan to ensure we are creating as vibrant and equitable corridor as we can. And I again want to emphasize the importance of keeping the community and our local civic leaders involved in all the next steps ahead. Our ANC commissioners from 3-4G have been thoughtful advisors and partners on the small area plan. and will continue to be an indispensable bridge to neighbors on both the Ward 4 and Ward 3 borders of Chevy Chase. Specifically, ANC leadership should be brought in early for zoning conversations and conversations regarding the development of the community center, library, and future housing in the civic core. And so I want to thank again to our witnesses, our community leaders, the Office of Planning, and I want to thank Councilmember Che publicly for her leadership over the years in this area. And I look forward to continuing to learn more. If you would like to know my July 1st newsletter, my June 24th newsletter, my May 6th newsletter, and my February 11th newsletters all have discussion of the small area plan. And so I can send those to the witness who commented regarding those. And as always, you can sign up. They can sign up or we can take their email and make sure they're getting the newsletters properly. So with that, thank you, Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses.
Thank you, Councilmember. I did not have any more questions for you, and I don't believe there are any other council members present. So I want to thank each of you for your testimony. A number of you did not provide copies of your statements. If you would please do that. The address is cow@dccouncil.us. I would appreciate that. The record in this matter will close at 5 p.m. on July 11th. The time is now. Oh, I'm sorry. I was forgetting the government. I want to thank each of the witnesses again for your testimony, and we will now proceed to hear from the Office of Planning. If Anita Kozer could come forward. Kozar, I got so excited that I almost excluded you. Is there anybody that you wish to join you?
Not at this time. Not at this time.
Okay. When you're ready, why don't you begin?
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Che, Councilmember Lewis George, and staff of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Anita Kozart, and I'm the Interim Director of the DC Office of Planning. I'm pleased to share with the committee the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan, transmitted to Council by Mayor Muriel Bowser and led by the Office of Planning. As outlined in the proposed resolution before you, the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan presents a community-informed guide for equitable and sustainable growth along the Connecticut Avenue corridor. The vision is to facilitate housing production, especially of affordable housing, and to improve neighborhood connectivity and vibrancy. The small area plan is organized around 6 core themes, envisioning a Chevy Chase with an inviting social and cultural character, an inclusive built environment, a reimagined civic core, an equitable housing strategy, a thriving retail corridor, and safe and sustainable mobility. The Chevy Chase Small Area Plan outlines housing strategy recommendations that serve as an instrumental guide in helping the district meet and exceed housing goals for the Rock Creek West planning area. This area currently has the fewest dedicated affordable housing units of the district's 10 planning areas. The small area plan will help to catalyze the important redevelopment opportunity that exists to strengthen the civic core in Chevy Chase, featuring a new state-of-the-art public library and community center with mixed income and affordable housing. Council has approved $24 million for the library and $17.5 million for the community center in the capital budget for fiscal years 23 through 25. OP looks forward to working with partner agencies, the community, the zoning commission to implement recommendations, design guidelines, and rezoning described in the small area plan. And also, we understand the committee's desire for the ANC to continue to play a significant role as OP works on zoning to implement the small area plan. OP is interested in working with the ANC during the implementation phase, and we will be responsive to the council's wishes in this regard, wherever they're expressed. The Chevy Chase Small Area Plan was developed with the support of community partners, including a community advisory committee comprised of ANC commissioners and civic leaders who advised on how, where, and when to engage the Chevy Chase community. Through the development of the draft plan, OP staff led and participated in 45 community events held in person and online. This engagement yielded over 500 participants at virtual meetings, 100 participants in community walks, and over 700 responses to online surveys. During the 2-month comment period on the draft Chevy Chase Small Area Plan, 32 individuals provided oral testimony at the mayoral hearing, while 117 individuals submitted written comments using an online form. Updated racial equity policies in the 2021 Comprehensive Plan and the Council's Office of Racial Equity Racial Impact Assessment Tool informed the engagement process, the recommendation development, and anticipated implementation of the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan. Community dialogue involved confronting the history of discriminatory land use and development practices. Data used in the plan was disaggregated by race and analyzed considering different impacts by race, with benchmarks identified for achieving more equitable outcomes. OP also worked closely with the mayor's office on racial equity to apply a racial equity lens, both as a process and an outcome throughout the small area plan. In conclusion, I would like to take a moment to thank our staff who have ably led this planning process through the challenges of the pandemic, our district agency partners who provided valuable subject matter expertise, and particularly to Councilmember Che and her staff for their dedicated time and support. I also want to thank the hundreds of residents that have engaged with OP on the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan, and in particular, the members of the Community Advisory Committee and ANC 34G. Lastly, I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to discuss the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan and encourage prompt council approval. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Cozart. Let me see, I want to begin with the ANC 34G request. The language. I'm trying to see if I can. The ANC urged this language be adopted by the council. ANC 34G and the Chevy Chase community provided significant assistance in developing the small area plan, and their direct participation, i.e. a seat at the table with the Office of Planning from the outset of whatever process is used in developing and preparing any implementation measures for the small area plan, will be essential to the success of this undertaking. In particular, ANC 34G will be considered an implementer of recommendation 2.1 on page 29 of the small area plan to create a new zone along Connecticut Avenue between Livingston and Western Avenues that incorporates the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan urban design guidelines, specifically those that address building form. Do you have any objection to that language?
No, we do not.
And they also, the ANC asked that the council's resolution include the following paragraph, quote, because of its initiative in proposing and supporting redevelopment of the civic core, ANC 34G will be considered an implementer in recommendation 3.1 on page 31 of the small area plan to redevelop the community center and library into a multi-purpose civic core with state-of-the-art public facilities and mixed income housing, unquote. Do you have any problem with that language?
No, we do not.
There was some testimony that affordable housing is not required in this small area plan. Can you speak to that?
So as you have shared, Chairman, and set the context so ably for this, that both a comprehensive plan and small area plans serve as a guide for our goals around all kinds of issues, including affordable housing. And so certainly We've had, through the small area planning process, discussions around sets of priorities and interests as it relates to levels of affordable housing, and just even deepening our understanding of that. So there's nothing that's in the small area plan that that would create a condition where affordable housing at the levels that have been discussed inside of the context of the comprehensive plan and were outlined by the council as it relates to that. There's nothing in the small area plan that undoes that. And certainly what the small area plan does is really talk more deeply about how that would be accomplished on a Connecticut Avenue. And so that's what I would say in response to that.
So the small area plan is guidance, not a requirement. The comprehensive plan is more of a requirement, but as you know, you and I were both very much involved with the comprehensive plan. The requirement would come with the zoning.
That's correct. The requirement would come with the zoning, or if it's in the case of something that involves council approval around a disposition or council approval as it relates to certain sorts of funding, that guidance prevails there.
Now, I know you spoke to this in your testimony, but I want to bring it up again, and that is, so there was quite a bit of criticism of an inadequate public participation process. Can you just, since I put it that way, can you say more with regard to that?
So I guess what I would want to offer, I've been listening to the entire testimony, or all the folks who testified. I guess what I would want to offer is that it was definitely doing engagement during a pandemic is challenging, particularly because as folks have shared, there are other priorities that people have, especially as we began the process, kind of really adjusting to the sets of challenges that folks face. So that notwithstanding, we worked to engage everyone as best we could with every tool that we had at our disposal that was within our means to use. From a budget perspective and from a staffing perspective. We had staff that did go door to door and drop off flyers. We had staff to post flyers in places where people would see them along the Main Street corridor, along some of the more densely populated areas. We also did do a postcard mailing in advance of two of our kind of linchpin community engagement activities, the ones around kind of a design charrette and another community visioning session, kind of the main bookends for the planning process. And then certainly our community advisory committee were those ambassadors that I talked about for the planning process. So that's what I would say about that. Is there always room for improvement? Absolutely. And I would welcome that feedback. I heard some things here. Councilmember LaStorge talked about some opportunities to kind of do phone calls or robocalls. We haven't explored that just yet. The text messaging piece is something that we've done some investigation for, and we're hoping we can pull in some of these ideas as we roll out some future planning engagement work as well.
Well, there was a witness who held up a card from a realtor and said, well, this postcard got to me, I guess, in Barnaby Woods, but we didn't get anything from OP. So you said you sent out some postcards regarding, I guess, the design charrette and one other event. Do you know how many you sent out or where they were sent?
It was about 2,000, and it was really inside that study area for the addresses that we had inside the study area boundary.
And the study area is what we called the lasso when we adopted the comprehensive plan?
So the portion of the lasso that is really, you read the boundaries of the small area plan through the resolution at the beginning of this hearing. That's the boundary that we used for that.
Okay. There was some testimony about how, I'm looking at something here. The small area plan adopts without change the mixed use and increased density along all of Connecticut Avenue to 5 stories as a right. This one size fits all approach is not appropriate. Can you comment on that?
So we actually took an approach and kind of documented it in the small area plan that it wasn't kind of one side. We took, especially when we were talking about design, we looked at 4 particular areas or 4 kind of nodes that have characteristics, not nodes, I'm sorry, 4 kind of design areas that have characteristics in common. So our civic core, we looked at the west side of Connecticut Avenue. We looked at the east side, understanding that they have different characteristics to each other, and really started to think about what are those design recommendations that are common, and then the ones that are distinct for each of those 4 areas. So we took an approach that was really tailored towards the nature and the potential possibility for those individual areas.
So you're saying that there was more variation in the design that you recommend?
That's correct.
There was also this testimony. The plan offers exquisite detail on page 58 about how every single foot of our generously wide Connecticut Avenue sidewalk should be used. But when it comes to building height, an important proxy for development intensity, the only numbers you will find in the document are in a legend for 2 pictures near the back. And even there, the numbers are treated as nothing more than illustrative.
So my comment there would be overall, we took to heart the guidance and your comments that your comments regarding the comprehensive plan, that we need to really think about how to make documents that we put together much more concise and much more easily digestible. And so we've got a lot more content that we presented at Design Charrettes that really has many more graphics that focus on height and massing and other things. And those were presented and shared on our public input website and circulated for folks to have comments on. What landed in the small area plan is a couple of cross sections that really do talk about what are the maximum heights that are possible? What are those transitions, what they look like? Sorry, I'm sitting here referring to page 55, which may be what the person who testified was referring to as well. But it really, we tried to really focus in on what were the most important kind of diagrams to help people understand what came out of the engagement process and what are the kinds of recommendations that are needed as it relates to design guidelines that would go forward in any zoning process. I hope that helps to provide.
It does, but it leads to this question. That is, so the next step after the council, if the council approves this, is that a zoning case would be developed. And we just talked about the ANC having a very clear role in developing that case. But what I heard you say just now is that the Office of Planning had much more detail, which it presented at or which was developed as a result of these community meetings and design charrettes and so forth. So the small area plan is adopted. The small area plan is given to the zoning commission together with a case. But how's the community to see this detail? Where does it point to and say, hey, you know, it wasn't just simply what's on page 55 or 58. There's actually this greater detail. How does the community put its hands on that?
Sure. So I just want to make a slight adjustment to what I said, is that there were more diagrams. I would not say they were at a deeper level of detail than what you find in the small area plan. There were just more of them, more options that people, when they came to a kind of community session, there was an opportunity for them to engage a little bit more. But the next step in this is for OP to take the sets of recommendations and look at the existing zones that we have that have already been improved by the zoning commission. Think about, based on what is in the small area plan, what are those zones that make the most sense as a basis, and then start to craft zoning text that aligns with the recommendations that are in the small area plan. That zoning text plus that map amendment together, that is what would be shared. And based on kind of the feedback that we've seen from the ANC 34G and this hearing here, it would make sense, if the ANC would welcome us to do that, for us to be able, for OP staff to be able to present that draft text, that draft map amendment information at an ANC meeting, because of the deep involvement that the ANC meeting or meetings prior to that going to the zoning commission.
I'm not sure that quite answered my question. I'm a little over my time. Councilmember Lewis George, I hope you'll forgive me. I started by reading this from testimony. The plan offers exquisite detail on page 58 about how every single foot of our generously wide Connecticut Avenue sidewalk should be used. But when it comes to building height, an important proxy for development intensity, the only numbers you will find in the document are in a legend for 2 pictures near the back. And even there, the numbers are treated as nothing more than illustrative. Now, when I read that to you a few minutes ago, your response was, well, but actually there was much more detail. There were many more documents. We left those out of this document, the small area plan, because we didn't want the plan to be overwhelmed with this kind of detail. And then my question was, so if there are these other documents, how does the community put its finger on them? If they're not in this document, how do they put their finger in them? Because when it comes to the zoning commission, there will be a case, there'll be a proposed document, and somebody may want to say, well, but hey, there's the legend for the 2 pictures near the back. They want to point to that, but then there was additional detail you noted. How do they put their fingers on that additional detail?
So one way is just today, folks could just reach out to us directly and we'll point them in the direction, because that additional detail is on our website. We've got all of the information that was presented at all of the public meetings is on the website. And so if folks need help navigating that, they can reach out to us, 202-442-7600. And as we move forward, where should there be a need for additional illustratives that are beyond what's in this small area plan, those would be a part of the draft proposal that OP would put together and share, as I mentioned, with the Advisory Neighborhood Commission in that public setting, in order for folks to get access to that and be able to look at that and give feedback on that. I hope that helps to answer the question more directly.
It might. I'm going to think about it while Councilmember Lewis George asks questions, if she has some. Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon. I want to first address the concerns and frustrations some have raised today about OP's outreach and engagement throughout the planning process, and specifically engagement of Ward 4 residents. I think my team and I have amplified OP comment and event opportunities where we could in our newsletters and on social media, but I know mailers and door knocks only happen sort of within that small radius of Connecticut Avenue corridor, which locked out all of Ward 4 Chevy Chasers out of the proactive engagement. Pandemic barriers aside, can you speak to the decision-making process here and what could have been done differently to better engage Eastern, Chevy Chase, Barnaby Woods, and Hawthorne neighbors? Was it a time constraint matter, a budget matter, a staffing matter, or something else? And what is it we can do to make sure OP has the resources it needs to drive sort of robust engagement forward in all of our planning processes and in Chevy Chase going forward?
So I would say it's probably most likely a combination of the things that you shared about staffing, about budget, about timeframes. Those are factors. I don't want those to be conveyed as reasons not to reach out, because they're not. And so certainly our team is going to go back and think about what are the ways that we can engage folks that are outside of, kind of that study boundary, but have a deep interest in it. There are many means that we can explore. The Community Advisory Committee, we can explore other options for that. We're definitely open to that and mindful of this feedback that we've received from folks today.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we look forward to being, partners in moving that forward. And if there's any, ways that we can partner and help to engage our Barnaby Woods and Hawthorne and Chevy Chase neighbors, we're here to help in that way. If you need more people knocking doors, if you need, extra set of hands for phone calls, please let us know. I'm glad to hear a couple of residents lift up Green New Deal for housing and social housing models is a way we can achieve more affordable housing in Chevy Chase. Social housing models creates, mixed income housing with a goal of closer to 60% of units being affordable and deeply affordable housing in particular. Is social housing something the Office of Planning explored for Chevy Chase and for the Civic Core in particular? I know ANC 34G had hoped for the Civic Core to generate at least 50% of units as affordable. And so I'm curious as to why goals like this are not currently in the plan.
So, well, first, I want to thank you for your offer to help as it relates and give support as it relates to engagement, and we will likely take you up on that. And your question, I hear kind of two parts. One about social housing and did we explore it explicitly for the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan? We did not. To be frank, and given the focus as it relates to the Green New Deal proposal, it's something that certainly we will want to take a look at and think about how does it potentially fit in. The timing on kind of preparation of this plan and that legislation was a little bit different, but there's opportunities for us to kind of learn from that. Specifically on the request for 50% of the ANC's request as it relates to 50% of the housing at the Civic Core. The piece there for us is that we were really wanting to make sure that we have sets of recommendations that are in the small area plan that have alignment with the comprehensive plan. And so there are kind of a range of tools that are available to be used. And there is language in the comprehensive plan about making sure that there is housing production that's accessible to very low and low income and extremely low income households that would be in Chevy Chase and otherwise. And so the key piece there was just making sure that there's that alignment that exists with the comprehensive plan. We didn't want to kind of step outside the guidance of that.
Okay, so the way I understand it is sort of the way you all are defining affordable, what you're defining as affordable is strictly going to be based on what we've defined as affordable within the comprehensive plan.
That's correct.
Okay, and so basically that would lead us to 80% AMI affordable housing is sort of what you all are defining as affordable based on the comprehensive plan.
Well, the comprehensive plan has the levels of extremely low, moderate, and so the priorities and levels of affordability there are arranged. So it's not just 80%. No.
Okay, and so we do have some of that 30% AMI housing for families, as well as sort of 80% AMI affordable for seniors. Is that a that's a part of what you all are considering for this plan?
That would be the guidance for development of housing.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Now, would OP be open to pushing the city to explore social housing further as civic site redevelopment planning moves forward?
So I would say that's something for the mayor to speak directly on. As I said, certainly as we follow what's happening at the council, it's important for us to be up on the proposals that are there and what are the impacts related to planning, land use design, zoning, implementation, et cetera.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that, and I will follow up with the mayor. And are there specific goals for generating affordability components of extremely and very low income households? Like, are those defined as the specific goals?
I want to make sure I understood your question. So is your question, does the small area plan highlight very specific goals for very low? Okay.
Yes.
So we do not, because the small area plan is to be supplemental and advisory to the comp plan, and the comp plan has that language included in it. And so to make sure that alignment exists, that's how we move forward with that.
Okay, so I think that's the piece where some of our commissioners and community members are worried because you don't have the specific goals for generating the affordability components. And I think the other piece here is that the comp plan sort of sets the floor, but we can always go further than what the comp plan has set out. And so is there a space where you all push for higher goals and make those goals specific, instead of looking at that comp plan as the floor? We can go further, and you all have the choice to basically go further and specifying those goals.
So the way we think about it is that level of specificity is what you see in implementation, whether it's related to kind of a budgeting activity, whether it's related to approval of a contract, whether all of those kind of sets of things. That is the place where that level of specificity goes, especially since there is existing district law around some of those moves that governs and is ahead of guidance that's available in a small area plan.
Okay. All right. I still think there's just sort of a space for us to be more specific here, and I hope that and we can move towards putting some more specific language there and going a little bit further. I have about 48 seconds left, so I don't want to. I have another set of questions, but I'll save that until the last time. But I just want to reemphasize that if we don't specify, that means basically we're relying on developers to do this on their own, and whatever our housing production trust fund allows, which I think we know in the past has been too loose. So I think we have opportunity here, and we should grasp it. And I will get to my next set of questions on my next round. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember, and there'll be one more round. Ms. Cozart, the comprehensive plan requires an analysis of current infrastructure and utility capacity against full build out and projected population and employment growth. Is there such an analysis in the small area plan?
So what we did in the small area plan was describe well, let me put it to you this way. We did not provide kind of a detailed analysis in that small area plan. What we did is what we, as you know, from your deep work in the district and the region, is that the Council of the Council of Governments of Metropolitan Washington, we have a 20 to 30 year forecast of growth, and that helps determine what are some of the needs for public facilities, utilities, et cetera. So what we did is we used that forecast as a baseline and really compared that with the full build out of the future land use map. And that is the cooperative forecast is what utilities company use to really think about improvements that they will make to their system. And so what we determined from kind of doing that comparison is that the 500 or so units that are expected over the next 20 to 30 years, probably closer to 25, would be a marginal impact, particularly to water and sewer systems. And those impacts would not likely be experienced by Chevy Chase residents. And so that is the analysis approach that we did. What you'll find in the small area plan is details about the sets of agencies that are responsible for assessing sets of impacts as it relates to kind of the permitting process. And reiterates that there's nothing in the comprehensive plan that, nothing in the small area plan that undoes that, but just affirms that, and then also affirms what the comprehensive plan says about the requirements of making those determinations.
So you're saying that this, as part of your work, there was some analysis done. I heard you say maybe as many as 500 units would be generated by the development contemplated with the small area plan, and that the impact, and that's over 25 years, and that the impact, you did a rough analysis of the impact, that it would be minimal.
That's correct.
But let me see, I'm saying but because there's also, I'm looking at language 2503.6, addressing circulation improvements, transportation management. There was some testimony about how the transportation analysis was lacking. Can you speak to that?
Sure, and this was one of the things that we included in the small area plan to provide that clarity for folks to understand kind of that bridge between planning and implementation. We talked about sets of transportation demand analysis that's required, and how that would have to align with what are some of the recommendations in the small area plan, as well as other sets of plans that are transportation related. And so that's the language that we put in the small area plan related to transportation in particular and other infrastructure.
So let me go back to housing. I'm going to ask this question. This is a different way of approaching the issue. Can you speak to how the plan balances, the small area plan balances the competing interests, the competing needs of more housing and being sensitive to density?
So the key to that is the section, well, there's a couple keys. One is about location. I talked about the 4 kind of areas that I only mentioned 3 because I couldn't remember the 4th. The 4th was the gateway area. And so the 4 areas, so we took account for the fact that we can imagine there could be more kind of potential, particularly because the district ownership and the district investment in the civic core, that is something that might move forward, and that there's sets of lessons that we can learn about implementation of our design guidelines that are in the small area plan that could be used as it relates to sets of proposals that move forward for other parts of Connecticut Avenue that we don't imagine are as soon as in the pipeline. So thinking about the unique context of each of these 4 areas, the gateway area, the western frontage, the eastern frontage, and the civic core, and using the design guidelines to address issues related to transitions, to massing, to materials, to height, how height is treated as it relates to new development. Those are the tools that you use to balance this piece around more housing, more development, including retail development that we hope continues to help the existing Main Street, as well as the issues related to kind of density or more intense infill development.
So the balancing that you're describing is one I'm going to call of transition.
Transition is one piece. Massing is another piece. Just where do you put kind of the height and the bulk? The transition is the piece that scales to another potential development, scales into the neighborhood, et cetera. Materials, that matters for how people experience the building itself, particularly from a pedestrian level. Those are some of the key pieces of form that are important for balancing that piece around more dense infill development.
Some have expressed concern that the many uses envisioned for the current library site may be too much for the 2-acre footprint. Can you speak to that? If I remember correctly, it's library, it's housing, it's some outdoor recreation space, it's parking. I can't remember if there was anything else, but the suggestion was it was too much for 2 acres.
So that is, I think that's a new piece that I've heard. I guess what I would say is we would, certainly look to examples of other places in the city where we feel like we've done this well. And I guess I would say that there may be a different way of kind of thinking about and learning from the ways that new libraries have come online and new rec centers have come online that could really inform the public process that's going to happen around that civic core. And we can certainly, upon approval of the resolution, start to activate that community conversation where folks can share some of that, and representatives of DC Public Libraries and Parks and Rec and our economic development agencies can really talk about what are some of those specific concerns people have about that. It's not our understanding that there's an issue there. We have not heard that to be an issue either from parks, libraries, or economic development, and we hadn't really heard that as a strong issue in the development of the SAP. So, but certainly there is room to look at that. If that is a really make or break issue, there's room to look at that following the approval of the smaller plan.
Well, so in sum, what I'm hearing you say is that you don't think it's too much to put on the 2-acre site.
I don't.
My last question, the comprehensive plan generalized policy map contains several planning lassos that required additional planning work before proposals could go to the zoning commission. Can you explain what the approval of this plan will mean with regard to the Upper Connecticut planning lasso?
So this will mean so what this means, let's say once the small area plan is approved, what this will mean for projects that move forward in that lasso, and if they move forward before the zoning changes that OP proposes are made, is that folks will have to abide by the design guidelines and put a project before the zoning commission if they want to do something outside of the baseline zoning that exists. That's probably not likely, but I did want to put that out as a scenario. More likely is that when there is interest in doing redevelopment following the rezoning process, property owners will have to adhere to that, the conditions that are in the zoning text and the zoning map with their projects as they move forward. So did I answer that question?
I don't know. So the last one, in a sense, was a hold on development until planning was done. So the implications of this plan is that basically that hold is released. With this plan, now you working with the ANC and others will go before the zoning commission, and there'll be a public process of rezoning, creating a new zone district. But in terms of the hold on projects going forward, this plan completes that.
Yes, essentially it does. There were projects the council put in, there were projects that had certain characteristics to them around affordable housing, that were planned unit developments that could move forward. They can move forward today. They can put forward a project now if they are in a lassoed area. But more likely, they would wait until that zoning process is complete.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Councilmember Lewis George, you had additional questions?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wanted to go back to the Chairman discussing about the transportation demand analysis. Can you just speak to sort of from what you all gathered from, I guess the transportation demand, what are you thinking as far as accommodating for needed parking elsewhere? Should there be the street parking be removed on Connecticut for the added bike lanes? What has been done to sort of discuss needed parking elsewhere in the area? I'm asking because I have a number of seniors who live in, Chevy Chase, Barnaby Woods, Hawthorne community, some who live in Ingleside, Knollwood, and they have said to me they use Connecticut Avenue. They often park in the front. They have accessibility parking or handicap parking, however you would like to phrase that. And so does the assessment consider I guess that door-to-door front parking? Are we looking at sort of having, what do you call those, underground, enough underground spaces for some of us, for those who maybe need accessibility issues, or what have you all, what's being considered, and what did the analysis say about the demand that would basically promote finding other ways to have parking, especially accessible parking near some of the entrances of Connecticut avenues?
So just what I do want to point to is that there are a couple of recommendations in the small area plan that are specifically related to what you're asking about. And this is where we'll have some really important leadership from the District Department of Transportation. And the two that are around here or that are related to those are 6.3 and 6.4. And one of them is about developing a coordinated parking plan and for better utilization. The other, and they, I think, link to each other, are about studying changes to curbside management, a half block east and west of Connecticut Avenue corridor, so inclusive of the corridor itself. This is about the different transportation needs that exist, as you so ably put forward, and that those kind of studies and coordinated parking plan would be vital to this and need to go hand in hand with the development. And what we can share, I guess, as a follow-up, if that's helpful, is kind of thoughts on kind of timeline, what that looks like, how near term that would be.
Yeah.
But we certainly, that is how we recognize that as a critically important issue. And obviously, the District Department of Transportation has sets of requirements as it relates to accessibility that they need to meet that would be a part and parcel to that work.
Okay. And so I'm hearing there are some forthcoming, I guess, study plans regarding that. And as far as solutions go, are there any sort of, I guess, solutions you all explored here throughout this process that we know we can communicate to neighbors that will be a part of the small area plan?
That was not really in the scope of what was asked for with this plan, given that it was focused on what are the sets of kind of urban design and zoning and land use tools that are needed to recognize, you know, the change to the future land use map. What does that look like? But we recognize that with the recommendations.
Okay. The other piece of that is going to have to be a conversation with WMATA regarding more frequent buses and more bus routes. We've had sort of back and forth with WMATA in the past about them eliminating bus routes because of user, you know, people being able to use it, but it was obviously during the pandemic. And so just noting now that a part of the conversation process has to be around with WMATA regarding frequent buses and adding bus routes, if that's gonna be a reality to also be a part of the discussion when it comes to our seniors getting around. I wanna go to back to housing for a moment. One of the reasons I was trying to understand specifics about the affordable housing because I wanted to understand if we're building housing for families, for seniors, for singles. And one of the questions is if we're anticipating more families, which I know we are, then we need to be mindful, I think, of school infrastructure. Can you speak to conversations that happen around schools and childcare, and sort of what thought was given toward a plan to generate more childcare programs along the Connecticut Avenue corridor? Early childhood programs obviously need to be ground level, and given, I think, the shift of retail to online versus brick and mortar, I think childcare is a good use of ground level space. So wanted to see if there were any conversations where you could speak to that being a part of the plan as well.
So what I would say explicitly is that there is nothing in the plan that that would be a barrier to that, certainly. We have to look closer to see if there's anything that is a catalyst, and I'm not sure that there is, because that was not a large part of the conversation. I think it came up a bit, but I think that I can say with confidence that the small area plan and its interest in being a vibrant retail corridor would be very much in line with sets of investments in trying to incentivize and provide support for childcare and early child development in and along the Main Street.
Okay, perfect. And I'm adding things to the conversation, I think, that are important and should be going into considerations. Want to ask about some eminent domain opportunities. The diner at Morrison and Connecticut has stood empty for years. Can you speak to what is going on with this site, and if there is an opportunity for eminent domain for the city to build housing there?
I cannot speak to that site or if there's an opportunity around that, but that's something we can get back to the committee about. Okay.
And then in addition to the diner, the Safeway parking lot, what's the plan? Can we eminent domain that as well? My understanding is that Safeway doesn't own the parking lot, just the store.
That is another one that we would have to get back to the committee in response after the hearing.
Okay. And then want to get a little bit back to the traffic issues. What are the traffic calming measures coming off and into the circle? How are those needs going to be integrated into this? And what are sort of the next steps in the planning process around specifically the circle?
So we kept our recommendations fairly general there. So there's not necessarily like much more detail beyond kind of the importance of safe and accessible crossings and making sure that at the circle specifically. I can get back to you, check in with the team and see if there's more specifics as it relates to some conversations and public input as it relates to that. In many ways, again, this would be something that is a bit outside of the scope of the small area plan.
Okay. I just added because that circle is dangerous, and with added foot and vehicle traffic, that has to be sort of top of mind and not an afterthought. Can I ask you, what is the city, what is the thinking on the Chevy Chase Circle in particular? Is the city advancing any plans or redesigns here, or trying to get any of that land back from MPS at all?
So I'll say as a general note that in general, we are constantly trying to work with the National Park Service, particularly around sets of lands that have great stewardship opportunities, because community has expressed interest and there's deep civic infrastructure. And so certainly the Gateway would be a part of that. Each of the reservations that MPS holds has its own, kind of history to it.
Absolutely.
We would be happy to work with your office as it relates to that, and certainly Councilmember Che's office as well.
Okay. And then last section of questions, but I'm just going to do it one. What is being done? One thing we see with some of the development, there are legacy businesses that sometimes get priced out of the corridors. We have development on our side, and I'm sure where we want to make sure we ensure that legacy businesses who may have to move temporarily can come back. And we've been working on our end on this side of development. We have a 14th Street. So I want to understand what is being done to basically ensure legacy businesses are not priced out of the corridor, and sort of what is the plan to ensure we are recruiting more local sort of independent businesses to the Strip versus national chains and banks, and sort of what is the city role in recruiting those businesses specifically recommended by residents to bring to this area, but also do you all include any of that in the conversation around planning, how we take an assessment of the legacy businesses to make sure we can keep them there?
So we absolutely think this is an important priority, and through the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development have resources and supports available. Mainly, you can find most of them at the Clearinghouse, obviously dc.com. I'm happy to share some specifics that would be applicable to Chevy Chase as a follow-up to the committee.
Okay, but they are the small businesses are a part of the conversation and the planning, and you all are coordinating with the respective offices in that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We had at least 25 or more to 25 plus businesses engaged through the small area plan process.
Great. That's great to hear. I think I'm gone over my time. Sorry, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's going to conclude the questions I have for this hearing. And Councilmember Lewis George, you are done with your questions?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cozart.
Thank you.
The record, I'll just say this as I close out the hearing, the record in this matter will close at 5 p.m. on July 11th, 2022. The time is now 3 o'clock, and this hearing or roundtable is adjourned.